Welcome to We Have Ways of Making You Talk with me, Murray and James Holland, your Second World War podcast of choice. And this series we're offering for you, we're calling A British Band of Brothers, because we're looking at the trials and tribulations and progress of the Sherwood Rangers Yeomanry. And they're from D-Day to the end of the war, aren't we, Jim? That's what we're trying to encapsulate.
This bit is just Normandy.
Although, let's be honest, plenty to be getting on with.
Yes, we can do it. The last episode, we can say the Sherwood Rangers will return.
Like James Bond, because they won more battle honours than any other single British unit in the Second World War. Before we get into this, Jim, simple question for those who don't know, because I think those who are in the know that you've written extensively about the Sherwood Rangers Yeomanry, about the SRY. You've been a long-term enthusiast and advocate for the war they fought. Why are you so interested in the SRY?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And it goes back to 2004 and the 60th anniversary of D-Day. And a friend of mine, a great old school friend of mine, had gathered a little group of friends together, and we all went over in period trucks and jeeps and command cars and what have you to go and witness the 60th anniversary. And one of the people who was there on that trip was David Christopherson. And David subsequently became a really, really good friend, but he was telling me all about his father's experience. His father had landed on Gold Beach with the Sherwood Rangers, and he'd brought with him a whole load of his father's papers and journals and a 1 to 250,000 scale map of Normandy, which still had his father's pencil markings on it and all sorts of stuff. And I was completely captivated by this. And it was an amazing experience. And that really, because I don't really have a personal connection to the war myself, apart from my grandfather's being in auxiliary fire service in London and Birmingham, they kind of filled that gap. And I've just been obsessed with them ever since, just because they're just such remarkable people and they're just so everyday as well, but they kind of massively step up to the plate. You can absolutely recognize in some of these key characters, modern people today. They're the people that you and I know. And I think that's what it really, my study of them has really brought home the experience of the Second World War to me in a very kind of vivid way.
When I look at airborne forces, they're all volunteers. They're all into it, right? They would all be modern soldiers, volunteer, like modern soldiers are all volunteers. If you need an analogue of what we have today, that's what they're like. Whereas these guys, they're a yeomanry, and we need to explain what that is. That means they're reservists in the modern parlance, territorials essentially. They're not regular army. I mean, by the time they get to D-Day, make no mistake, they know exactly what they're doing. But the point is, this is a butcher, baker, candlestick maker formation of people also with a strong local base. So they all know they're all from the same communities. Old English county thing where you're connected to your community and your town or your county in a way that someone in, say, the Royal Tank Regiment isn't, because they're not necessarily recruiting geographically, right? They're tied to their county, they're tied to their country in a slightly different way, and tied to the army in a different way. They are gamekeepers and bankers and wine merchants and all this sort of jumble of people who wouldn't normally go near the army if they could possibly help it. That's what makes them so fascinating to look at. They're that group of people, and Stanley at the heart of it, motivating everybody and keeping them all going. None of them would rather be there. They'd all rather be at home. Not one of them wants to be a soldier.
Yeah, ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And I think the thing about it is what we'll do with this series is we will follow their fortunes through a handful of characters, very real characters. And you'll get to know them and so on.
I'm going to punt this at you, Jim. I think the other reason you find them so you're a county man, and these are English county people.
Yes.
We're town and country. That's the combination we have here, right? And I think what you're drawn to them magnetically because they're county people, like you're a county person. That's why I think when I see the way you write about them, the affection you have for these guys, I see that. Well, what's their role? They're part of the 8th Armoured Brigade. For Overlord, they're attached to the 50th Tyne Tees Division, the Fox's Head. And the idea with 8th Armoured Brigade is they are basically kind of freelance, aren't they? They'll go where they're required. They're a sort of fire brigade, freelance, self-contained, self-sustaining armoured brigade with tanks. And the idea is they're supposed to rock up and help out with infantry on the as and when. Though for D-Day, they're attached to 50th Tyne Tees Division with the TT really cool TT badge.
I also think it's important for people to understand that these independent armoured brigades, which is what 8th Armoured Brigade are, they're not part of an armoured division. And for those of you who are new to this, the division is the unit by which we judge the scale of armies in the Second World War. And if you think of it as being about 15,000 men, give or take, some are much smaller than that, some are much bigger than that, but as a rule of thumb, 15,000, then that's the kind of scale you're talking about. But you would have 3 infantry brigades in an infantry division, and you would have 1 independent armed brigade by 1944 supporting an infantry division. So a division is larger than a brigade. And the rule of thumb is that each of the 3 armoured regiments of the armoured brigade would be attached to each of the infantry brigades of the infantry division. And I hope you haven't got completely lost on that. But basically, the armoured brigade is always sort of behind the infantry division in scale and rank, basically. That's the crucial thing, because obviously the commander of an armoured brigade is a brigadier. Commander of an infantry division is a major general. So you're always being outranked, which we will get onto, and that causes some problems later on. They are supporting the infantry division. They are not under command of. And it's a really, really important distinction.
We're talking about this infantry division combined with an independent armoured brigade is greater than the strength the British Army could put into battle now, right?
Yes, basically, yes. Yeah, so this is just 1/2 of Gold Beach.
But with nothing like the firepower that the British Army has in its possession now. Because numbers aren't everything. The destructive firepower that the armour we have could bring to the party now is far exceeds what 8th Armoured Brigade with its Sherman tanks and its priests or sextons could deliver. Let's just get out of the way.
Let's go back a little bit. Let's go back to the Battle of Alamein, and I want to introduce from the get-go one of our characters, and this is at the time in October 1942, a 21-year-old bespectacled lieutenant called John Simpkin. He has joined the Sherwood Rangers in 1940 when they'd been stationed in Palestine, and at the time there'd still been a mounted cavalry regiment then. So they get given their kind of permanent papers. So they're a TA unit as a yeomanry. In August 1939, they're told, right, that's it. You're now in for the duration of the war. In January, they get posted off to Palestine, and they go on the train down to Marseille with their horses, get on a boat, get to Palestine, and there they are. And they're involved in not the last, but one of the last cavalry charges with sabres drawn, where they're asked to intervene against Arab insurrectionists. I mean, it's just amazing. But these issues of the empire and imperial assets continue even once they've gone to war. There's later a stampede, which they find very humiliating, and they get their horses withdrawn. And the reason they get horses get withdrawn because they're not needed. There's no real imperative role for horses in the war that's taking place, and the plan is for them to be mechanized, but not all the yeomanry regiments, which had been cavalry in the 1930s, are going to be mechanized. Some of them are made into artillery. And because, of course, in the summer of 1940, there are hardly any tanks at all, you simply can't mechanize all the yeomanry regiments because there isn't enough tanks to go round. So the Sherwood Rangers get turned into artillery, which they all find massively infra-dig and a huge humiliation. I mean, it's just not what they're about at all. And they then spend the best part of 1940 and the first part of 1941 dicking around in Palestine, going on endless courses. It's sort of diaries sort of going, posted to Haifa for Bren gun course, posted to Cairo for, 25-pounder course or whatever it might be, and playing huge amounts of cricket and basically having a lark as far as I can make out. I mean, it seems very, very unstrenuous, and they all became frightfully good chums and had a very, very good time of it, really. And then they got split up because half the regiment goes to Crete and half of it goes to Tobruk. So some of them are gunners in the siege of Tobruk, including Stanley Christopherson and John Simpkin. And others get up in Crete. Some of them escape, some of them don't. But then finally, in the autumn of 1941, they are mechanized. There's now enough tanks. And so they get mechanized and they're training together. And their first ever action in tanks is at the Battle of Alam Halfa at the very end of August 1942. This is Rommel's last attempt to kind of break through to Alexandria and the Canal Zone following the capture of Tobruk in June 1941. At this point, they go into this huge sort of balaclava cavalry charge, and the whole of B Squadron gets basically slaughtered. 7 tanks are knocked out, are lost. A further 4 are knocked out over the course of the battle. And John Simpkin, who at the time is intelligence and navigation officer, has watched this charge down, from and in this valley below the Alam Halfa Ridge with utter despair. And he then returns to A Squadron as a troop commander under Major Stanley Christopherson. And they're then getting ready for the Battle of Alamein, by which time they're partly in Shermans, partly in Crusaders. So A Squadron is in Crusaders, but B and C are in American-built Sherman tanks by this point. And before that, John Simpkin and his great mate Ronnie Hill get given some leave. And they know the battle is coming because, of course, as we've discussed in previous series about Alamein, they know there's this huge offensive about to come. And they have a great old time. They stay in the Continental Savoy Hotel. They go to see a performance of Tobias and the Angel, which is an opera. They tour bazaars and go out in Gary's and so on. And they also contemplate their mortality. And John says, isn't it incredible to Ronnie? Isn't it incredible that here we are, larking around in Cairo in this kind of sort of, having all the trappings of peacetime life. And in a few days' time, we're going to be in battle. I wonder whether we'll survive. And Ronnie says to him, who's a bit older, he's 26, he's got twinkly eyes, a moustache, wild hair. He says, oh, no, we'll be absolutely fine. I'm not worried about this at all. Ronnie Hill and John Simpkin are great mates because they've all shared a tent together with 2 others, Ken Graves and Ronnie Hutton. And they're basically soulmates. They're absolutely super tight. They spent 7 months living in a tent together, training on tanks in the desert. Lots of gags, lots of banter, lots of in-jokes and so on. And so they're super tight. And now they've all been spread to the 4 winds with their different squadrons and stuff. But on the second day of the fighting at Alamein, they're pausing behind the Mitiria Ridge. Although Ronnie is in a different squadron, he sees Simpkin, who's in his Crusader, jumps out of his Sherman tank, wanders across and clambers onto the back of the tank. And he's literally just start talking to him when suddenly, whoosh, down comes a shell, and Ronnie is just obliterated in front of John Simpkin right before his eyes. Because obviously the blast is going away from John. It just hits him, and that's that. And so he's covered with bits of his mate, but he doesn't do anything. He just carries on fighting the battle. They get through the Battle of Alamein, push on through all across Libya into Tunisia, and are part of the kind of the victorious 8th Army in May 1943. And by the time he gets to D-Day, he's 23. I mean, he's still absolutely nothing.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing that's striking, isn't it? That they are incredibly young, and in that time, in the fight up to Tunisia, they lose 2 commanding officers, and he loses another mate, doesn't he? Ken Graves. There's churn. There's nothing easy about any of this. They don't go to Sicily. They don't go to Italy. They're fortunate in that regard, aren't they? They're brought back to take part in Overlord,
and they're really good. I mean, they're there because 8th Armoured has repeatedly proved itself to be one of the best armoured units in the British Army by this stage. They've learned the point is they've learned the hard way. There's no more balaclava charge after Alam Halfa. They've absorbed the lessons of war. They don't come with any kind of sort of historical regimental baggage. So they are very good at adapting on the hoof. And there's no question that by the end of the Tunisia campaign, they understand concepts of all arms fighting. They understand how to coordinate with the artillery, how to coordinate with infantry, and all this shit. They're really freaking good. Is the bottom line of it, and a hard cadre of those who went away in 1940 on their horses are still part of the regiment, rather, by while they're training for D-Day.
In the run up to D-Day, then they've been re-equipped fully with Sherman tanks by this point, as has everyone, with some exceptions, obviously. But Monty likes the Sherman because it's done him well in the desert. So he basically says, well, we'll have that. On the 1st of June 1944, in the run-up to D-Day, you have B and C squadrons of the Sherwood Rangers Yeomanry. They're at their final assembly area, which is B9 Camp near Fawley in Hampshire. And obviously, it's one of those situations. All leave's been cancelled. They're all on camp. They're fenced in. They're waiting to ship out. Everyone knows what's about to happen. I mean, basically, the entire country does. I mean, it's a peculiar business, isn't it? It's kept secret, yet everyone knows. It's one of those odd moments in British history where absolutely everyone knows what's about to happen. I often think the secrecy aspect is slightly overplayed in the accounts. The entire south of the country is full of tanks and landing craft. In these preparations, Lieutenant Eric Bill Wharton, who's 31, so one of the older chaps, is writing a letter to his wife Marion on the leave he's just had. They went down to Bournemouth. But other than that, in the 5 years they've been married, they've only been together for 4 months.
It's brutal, isn't it?
Well, isn't it? And we people often frame war in terms of lives lost. Yes, fair enough. But what about all the stuff they've had to go without as a couple? All the things they've had to park. They've had to go without that time together. It's been put on hold with obviously the possibility that he might never come back. That's the demand that makes on people.
He's the son of a printer. So his family, he's got a family firm, they're printers in Retford. He's sort of lower middle class. He joined the Sherwood Rangers in the 1930s as a when they're TA. So he's sort of weekend soldier and all the rest of it. He's singled out and he gets pressed to go through officer training, and he gets commissioned in the field in Egypt. Despite everything he's seen, it's absolutely the making of him. He's sort of turned into a kind of a gentleman, really. But he's a very sort of gentle soul. I mean, his letters that he writes are just beautifully written and reveal a very empathetic, sensitive fellow. Someone who, he gets irritated like everybody else does. He sees the kind of absurdities in others and in himself. He comes across as a very warm, very attractive bloke, I would say. And different to John Simpkin. These are all different people jumbled up together, which is our point initially, that now the army's given that opportunity of promotion, he's taken it. He writes to Mary and he says, "It's rained a little this evening and brings to mind one of these pre-war days when you and I intended to go to tennis, only to change our plans because of a shower and go for a walk in the cool, fresh country around Babworth. As I look up now at the green leaves on the trees swaying in the breeze, I have a sudden pang of longing to be walking there with you." That's what people have had to put aside for 5 years. On the Friday, the 2nd, the regiment's ordered to start moving out for embarkation because the planned embarkation is Monday, the 5th of June, 1944. They're not travelling together. B and C squadrons are on the coast at Calshot, which is in Southampton Water. And I think there's still an army wharf there, actually. Yes, there is. And I should just say that the reason is because B and C squadrons are going to be in DD tanks. These duplex drive swimming tanks in the first wave, whereas A squadron is going to be in the reserve. So that's why they're in separate bits.
DD tanks, Rauray, you might say. I know they've been tested and they work and all this sort of stuff, but that adds an added bowel loosener, I would say. A squadron and the regimental HQ, they're embarking across Southampton Water. So the regiment comprises of, here's the nuts and bolts, 688 men in total. So about the same size as an infantry battalion. 179 vehicles, though, 84 tanks, which is 61 Shermans, 11 Stuarts, which are the recce element, 6 close support tanks, and 6 anti-aircraft tanks. The close support tanks are sort of essentially funnies, aren't they? With a larger gun for knocking things down, bunkers down, and 6 anti-aircraft tanks, which is the Centaurs with a cannon on. I think the less snazzy chassis gradually go down the pecking order in terms of the weapons that they're fitted with. There's 12 scout cars, there's 4 universal carriers, 57 trucks, 8 motorcycles, and 3 armoured recovery vehicles. And C Squadron are allocated 4 landing craft tanks, which are these enormous ships. They're sort of like roll-on, roll-off ferries, basically.
They're the kind of mid-size, aren't they? The landing ships are the 120-metre long ones, and these are the kind of sort of 50-metre long, so they're kind of sort of less than half size. And I think they can fit like 6 tanks on, can't they? Something like that.
You just think of the coordination. Think of the paperwork that goes into running a regiment that size. The spares, just the spares needed to run 179 vehicles. It's sort of, it's boggling, isn't it? Among these vehicles is C Squadron, who are, as you say, Jim, they're allocated 4 of these LCTs. Within C Squadron is Trooper Arthur Reddish, and he's ordered to reverse onto one of them. And before he does, I love these touches that are just fantastic. Before he does, he picks up a pebble from the beach as a souvenir, takes a piece of England with him, some corner of a foreign field that is forever England that he's got on him. He's a kid. He's only 22. His mother's a widow. He's from Lancashire. And he joined the SRY in North Africa before El Alamein. So he's come in when they're armoured rather than, he hasn't been through the travails of being a cavalryman and a gunner. He's badly burned at Wadi Zemzem in a tank that was hit, and 2 of his crewmates are killed. He's been training for D-Day with his current crew, who are replacements, just as he was a replacement. These preparations are fascinating, aren't they? So we touched on the LCT. This is the thing the British and the Americans have figured out, is how important it is for amphibious operations. You need your armour straight down, right from the beginning, right from the off. You need to be able to deliver armour.
Yeah, I think there's something like 32 different types of assault craft that they've got for this. But these landing craft, these LCTs, are just vital for the whole invasion, because it's reckoned you're going to need fire support. The infantry is going to need fire support when it's storming the beaches. And the British and Canadians are much more into this in a way than the Americans are. You know, they really see it absolutely integral to their beach storming plans. So, of course, you have to reverse because you've got to go straight out again.
The passage itself isn't the thing they're too bothered about at Calshot that night. The thing they're worried about is driving the DDs into the sea. For those that don't know what a DD tank is, and I'm sure you do, and I'm sure anyone who's been to the Tank Museum knows, because they've got one, this extraordinary Sherman tank in this huge sort of reverse skirt. Rather than the skirt going down, the skirt goes up, that displaces the water. Pure Archimedes physics here, that basically if an object displaces enough water, it will float. So the idea is you put this enormous canvas, hydraulically sustained canvas around the tank that acts as a skirt that displaces the water, that makes it float, and then you drive propellers off the tank's drive, which is what duplex drive means. Is they have 2 drive systems, which is the tracks, and then this screw basically under the tank that with a little rudder. I mean,
but there's no getting away from that the displacement is being caused by a waterproof bit of canvas, and the tank weighs 30 tons. I mean,
well, this is one of those things you can explain to me the physics all you like, mate.
It shouldn't work.
So they're loading the tanks up, and then the troopers start to assemble. I mean, these troop carriers start to assemble out in the solar. That's just extraordinary, isn't it? But, of course, what's also going on in the background is that meteorologists are worried about the weather. The weather gets a vote, and the weather is deciding to have its say at this point. With all these preparations that are going like clockwork, where every element has to be literally fit, everything, how they fit into these LCTs has been calculated down to the last inch. The weather is going to interrupt things, and General Eisenhower, is the Supreme Allied Commander, is offered weather forecasts that tell him that the Monday is no good, so they postpone. And I just imagine what that. I often think this is a thing that is underplayed in what that would be like, being one of those people. It's not, oh, well, I'll get the train tomorrow. It's not, I'll drive to Leeds tomorrow rather than today. That's not what's going on here. It's colossal embarkation. Everyone on their nerves. Everyone's written letters like the one that Bill Wharton's written, saying, I miss you. If only we had more days like those days we had before. Everyone's done that in some shape or form, and now they got to put themselves on hold.
So all revved up, then you've got to kind of mentally adjust. Very difficult.
So now there's time to kill, literally. And the crews, they'll be playing card games. They'll be drinking tea, inevitably. They'll be writing new letters going, well, there's been a delay. And they're checking their kit. They're checking their kit, cleaning their weapons, making sure everything's working, because they've got to somehow fill this time. Probably there's a bottle of scotch being passed around here and there. Anyway, so the Sherwood Rangers Yeomanry are performing their last minute checks. They've done their last minute checks, and now there's a new last minute foisted on them by Group Captain Stagg's weather forecast and the delay, the D-Day delay. We mentioned Stuart Hills and Dennis Elmore, who are 2 of the subalterns in the SRY. So who are these guys, Jim?
Yeah, well, they're comparatively new boys as well. They've only recently arrived with the Sherwood Rangers in the spring. Arthur Reddish, who we mentioned in the first half, the 22-year-old from Lancashire, who'd seen his 2 mates being killed at the Wadi Zemzem. He is in the crew of Stuart Hills. And Stuart Hills and Dennis Elmore, another lieutenant, are best friends from school, and they've ended up with commissions, training together down at Bovington in the Royal Armour Corps, and then being posted to the Sherwood Rangers together. And Hill's father had served in the Sherwood Rangers in the First World War and then started a career in Hong Kong where Hills was born. Hills is then, in the time-honoured fashion of colonial types, is sent back to school in Sussex and then to Tunbridge public school without his parents, barely sees them in his childhood and into his teenage years, which is why his friendship with Dennis Elmore is so incredibly important to him. And Elmore's family welcome him in, and he spends quite a lot of half terms and holidays and things with the Elmores. Elmore is very, very clever. He's a scholar, if I remember rightly. Hills is no mug, but he's not in the same kind of league. But they both mad keen on sport and rugby and cricket particularly. They've even played at Lord's together. They opened the batting for Tunbridge School at Lord's in the summer of 1943. So quite a bit, 1942 rather. And at this time, Hills's parents have been interned by the Japanese in Hong Kong. So they're prisoners. He doesn't know what's really much about them or what their fate is or anything like that. So this very intense childhood friendship with Dennis Elmore is incredibly important to them. And while they're training in Dorset at Bovington, they also meet Dick Holman, who's the same age as them. And Dick's older brother, Jack, is also in the Sherwood Rangers and is a second in command of C Squadron, I think, if I remember rightly. And three of them become really good mates together. They're posted to Sandhurst, then join the Sherwood Rangers. Their training for D-Day begins on the 19th of January, 1944. So up until that point, they've spent their training together. Yeah, best part of a year. Since September, they've been living, breathing, hanging out together, basically. And as they're assembling out on the Solent, Hills notes, "It was a lovely summer evening, but the excitement was pretty tense at the time." And Stuart Hills, it should be said, actually did write a ghost-written book in the early 2000s, but he also wrote loads and loads of notes at the time. When I was doing a book on this, I was lucky enough to get access to all those notes. And there is a kind of rawness and immediacy to them, which is just absolutely fantastic. So they're in C Squadron, but there's also A Squadron as well, who are going to be in the reserve. So they're not in DD tanks, and that is commanded by Stanley Christopherson, who we mentioned earlier.
And the idea is they're going to arrive an hour later, once the DD tanks have carried out the initial assault. Right now, Jim, I'd rather be an A Squadron.
Yeah, you and me the same.
I know how the physics works. I'm just not getting in it. Okay? Stanley Christopherson, again, everyone's got these tiny tells of good luck. So his is to keep a 9 of hearts playing card in his wallet for good luck. And he won a big card game with a 9. Why the 9 of hearts?
No, he just picks it up. He found it. He found it on the ground. He didn't like people wishing him good luck. If someone wished him good luck, he felt it was going to do exactly the opposite. It was okay. Like, you're sort of jinxing him. But he felt he needed something. And so while he's walking around Stoneham, just outside Southampton, he sees this 9 of hearts. And it still exists. It's still, his son David still has that very card. And when we did the exhibition at the National Army Museum, we had it on display there. So, yeah, it's absolutely amazing. Kept it in his breast pocket of his battle dress the whole way through. Very charismatic, very, very charming. He just has that easy charm, makes everyone feel they're the most important person in the room. He's one of those types. And he joins the Inns of Court Regiment in the TA when he's a stockbroker just before the war. The Inns of Court Regiment is broken up. And so those officers are then posted elsewhere. So he is not a Nottinghamshire guy. He's posted to the Sherwood Rangers. He's an enthusiast as well. So he just totally embraces the Sherwood Rangers. They're now his tribe. He's absolutely, would do anything for them, gets completely into it, and is one of the originals that goes off on the train to Marseille and the ship to Palestine, and is involved in the cavalry charge, blah, blah, blah. And although everyone's sort of very poo-pooey about being artillery, he has the wit to think, well, actually, if we're going to be mechanized in the future, having an understanding of how artillery works will be very useful. This is not a waste of time at all. So he takes all his courses. He does them all with great enthusiasm and just thinks, well, this is going to make me a better soldier, and therefore that's going to make me better able to survive. So that's how he is. That's his sort of outlook, and he does everything with sort of huge amount of charm.
I don't know anyone listening can hear how much you like Stanley Christopherson.
I'd love to have met him.
I know. It's very sweet, actually, Jim. It's a great thing to be around, everybody. I just want to put it that way. He's been wounded. He's been hurt at Alamein, but by shrapnel. So he knows this isn't someone who lives in a sort of enthusiastic bubble. He knows exactly what's going on here, and I think that's what's interesting about Christopherson, is he's able to sort of radiate this confidence, kind of in spite of everything. And I think that's what's interesting about it. One of the interesting things about his personality, isn't it, is that this is all awful. Everything's awful. What they're going to go through is horrendous, yet he somehow remains buoyant in the face of the reality. And I think he's a fascinating man for that, to have that. Is that strength of character? Is that just imperturbability or something? I don't know how you might class it, but it's very interesting that he's able to pull that off, because it's, as you said earlier, the responsibility these people deal with and the reality of it. He has been hurt, so he knows what this is all about. The men around him are fascinating, and we'll end up talking about one of these guys a lot later. So Sergeant George Dring is going to be a big figure as we go, and he's from Lincolnshire, because there is this sort of overlap with the counties here. He's been in the regiment again. He joined it for the old reason. He came in as a farrier for horses, because he's a countryman. These are country people, and he's 28 years old, and he's a celebrated amateur jockey and huntsman, and he's absolutely a country soldier. He's done very well in Tunisia, and people hold him in extremely high regard as a great natural soldier. And the other fellows, Sergeant Major Henry Hutchinson. It's interesting. He's from Sutton-on-Trent. He's another horseman, another natural horseman. Joined the Yeomanry the year after George Dring. And again, there's a lot of cricket. And the other reason anyone listening might understand why Jim likes the SLY so much is there's an awful lot of cricket played.
A lot of cricket references as well.
And he's a strong leader. He's fearless. He radiates authority. And he's picked up a military medal because in Alamein, he went out and rescued 11 wounded colleagues and was wounded himself. So this is someone people, of course, you're going to look up to a guy like that. And it's not unusual for the Sergeant Major to be the absolute key figure. That's who you want. That's who you need. The Sergeant Major is, of course, the bloke who goes, "Are you sure about that, sir?" They're the backbone of the British Army. On the evening of the Sunday, the 4th of June, with a howling gale and pissing rain. I mean, the weather is bad on the night of Sunday the 4th. Eisenhower's going to cancel. He only needs to look out the window to know it's not happening. Group Captain Stagg with his low pressure chart is one thing. I mean, it's a rotten June day, but he has sufficient faith in the forecast he's been offered to go on Tuesday, the 6th of June. So by the evening of Monday the 5th, they're on their way. We heard from Stanley that it's like going out. It's the kind of nerves he feels before going out.
It's just the rats in the stomach feel.
Obviously, everyone's given their dispatch cases with the maps, the latest intel on German defences, and they've been using maps with displaced place names, haven't they? So everywhere's called sort of Leeds and Batley and things like that on their maps, rather than the places they're actually going to.
Bagshot, St Andrew, yeah, all that kind of stuff.
And the maps are very, very, very well detailed. That there's been relentless photo reconnaissance, resistance information, cop parties going and having a look with binoculars. It's all been very well. Even the sound has been sampled in the preparations for D-Day.
Yes, and you can see these maps that exist, and you can get facsimiles of them, and they're just amazing. They are absolutely amazing. Every machine gun position, everything. Mine, beach obstacle, they're there.
And you know why it's bigot level clearance, Jim? Why the word bigot? Why it's bigot, don't you?
No.
The original French cartographer was called Bigot.
No. Is that why?
Yep. Yeah,
I love that. I never knew.
It's Jacques Bigot or whatever, and it's his original cartography. And if you look at those maps, I've got all the airborne ones, right? And they all say on them, maps are right as far as we know, based on, but as far as we know, they're right. The information they've got is pretty bloody good.
Little caveat in case I get sued.
They're going to land on Gold Beach. It's east of Armoured. And Armoured is essentially in the centre of the proposed lodgement area. Gold Beach is divided up into sectors, obviously. And so the SRY are going to land on Jig Green, which is the most western quarter of Gold Beach. So we said if it's east of Arromanches, but it's the western end, so it's the closest end of Gold towards Arromanches. B Squadron are supporting the 1st Battalion of the Hampshires, C Squadron, the 1st Battalion of the Dorsets, and the idea is they're going to arrive at H-5, so before H hour, which is when the main invasion is due to land. I always think these distinctions are quite interesting, that there's a main invasion, but they're 5 minutes before. They're the invasion.
The plan is for them to come ahead of the infantry. So you have the frogmen going in, you have the beach, the engineers going in to sort of clear up gaps in the minefield and through the dunes and all the rest of it. But the first fighting troops are going to be the Sherwood Rangers, then the infantry will follow immediately after. So in other words, they've already got suppressing fire support on the beach as the infantry hit. That's the plan.
Stanley Christopherson's pro style is, I think he's probably the Stoic Club spirit animal, Jim. I mean, so how does he describe the crossing, Jim?
We spent an uneventful but uncomfortable and sleepless night. It was cold and the sea was very choppy. Most of us felt sick, in spite of the seasick tablets which had been issued to us. It doesn't quite convey the kind of everyone chucking their guts up and kind of vomit sloshing around at the bottom of the LCT. But anyway.
Does the seasick tablet work on mortal nerves? Is the actual question here.
Yeah, possibly not.
The DD tanks of B Squadron, they're not far away. They're commanded by Major John Hansen Lawson. Second in command is Peter Saleri. And I think what's interesting about this is earlier on I made the point that these are all county people. Well, he's a Londoner. He's a townie in the middle of this lot. He's urbane, he's articulate, he's academic. He likes his history, he likes his literature.
He's a wine merchant. And he's very pretentious. And he's just hilarious. I mean, his letters and his journal is just so funny.
And another natural leader, or at least a man who's found that, the leadership qualities he never knew he had have been brought out of him by being in the army. Which is, I think, what happens to people, isn't it?
And he's very loquacious. He doesn't stop talking. So when he's talking, he never uses 2 words when 25 will work better.
We've been joking about these DD tanks and what they actually are, but they've been training on them intensely. They have been trained on the tanks, and what you do when you come in and have to drop the thing's upright skirt, how you land, and how you get your gun clear, and how you get stuck in, and then what happens if they start sinking? Of course, what the drill is. The driver sits in situ. The rest of the crew sit somewhere else where they can jump off very quickly in their life jackets if they need to. And the commander instructs him with the left a bit, right a bit. At 1 o'clock on Tuesday morning, I think, and D-Day is often sort of presented as running by like complete clockwork. But, many slip twixt cup and lip. At 1 o'clock on the Tuesday morning, Peter Saleri is informed by the LCT commander that they've lost contact with the rest of the invasion force. They've probably drifted west, and I think what's interesting is they spot another vessel, and they've been instructed you're not supposed to do this, but they flash the Allied recognition symbol with their lamp, and it's returned, and they've ended up so far off course. They're in the eastern edge of the American invasion force. Which is heading to Omaha Beach, which is the next one along.
Don't want to go there, mate.
They decide, the LCT commander thinks, right, well, actually what we'll do, we'll improvise, so we'll carry on the same course and then rejoin our force going on to Gold Beach, Jig Green at the last minute. But this, however, means that they're probably somewhere that hasn't been, they don't know whether it's been, they're somewhere where there may be mines, because there's been this amazing, super intense mine clearing effort to get the invasion force across that is all part of the sort of the naval battle, actually, that kind of gets forgotten about. But Peter Saleri says it's amazing, the guts of these people. He says, they've got to push on regardless, but he recalls, no one but the two of us knew the risk we were taking.
Yes, it's a bit like that. It was his son Gavin, who became quite a well-known poet, sent me these recordings that he'd done of his father, in the 70s or 80s or something. So I had his voice. It was lovely.
I amused myself mainly with that impression, but there we are. But by 0655, so 8-hour -5. Pretty much all of the LCTs get to the shore, but the weather, which of course has been the thing that's bedeviled the D-Day operation so far, is causing problems, and it's rough, isn't it? John Stagg, group captain Stagg's right up to a point. The weather's better than the day before, but not much.
No, they would have been fine if they'd gone. The only thing that would have been stuffed if they'd gone on the 5th was been the British airborne drop. But also, it's important to remember that this is Operation Neptune at the moment. Operation Overlord is the actual invasion. Neptune is the naval part of delivering the invasion force to Normandy. And they have command. It is a naval command. So it is up to the naval commanders, the force commanders and also the assault group commanders to make decisions about what they do. And that includes a contingency plan if the weather isn't good enough to launch DD tanks.
And so they proceed with a contingency. You've Lieutenant Commander Robert Alexander and Commander Hugh Wheeler, who are basically the people making these decisions. They say, all right, okay, we're going to bring the LCTs straight in because otherwise they could sink in the choppy waters. But this means congestion on shore, on landing, and the infantry are coming in. The carefully laid plan that what you'll do is lay down some armour and then the infantry will follow hot on its heels. Can't happen.
So the danger is that you've got all these LCTs on near the coast and they can't land the infantry. So instead, what happens is the LCTs go close to shore and then circle back. So some of the infantry recall seeing the LCTs going in the opposite direction, like they're running away. They're not. They're just in the process of circling round. So the idea is that the LCAs then go through, and the LCTs who have been ahead of them circle round behind them and then come in once the infantry have landed. So it means reversing the initial plan, which is for the armour to land first.
Oh, you can hear it now, can't you? Where are you going, you yellow bastards? Like that, you can hear it, can't you? The infantry that knew, at least, right? Because no one knows what's going on. No one knows what's happening. Well, no one knows, Jim. But I expect you're in a tunnel vision, aren't you? You're just thinking of the thing immediately around you. If you're on an infantry landing craft, you're like thinking, oh, crap, here it comes. We've been talking about Padre Captain Leslie Skinner because we know who he is. But who is Leslie Skinner, Jim? Because he's a remarkable fellow, and I think the Padre's role is perhaps one might assume, well, he does a service on a Sunday and he's there for the men if they're feeling down and feeling blue. But the role of a Padre in combat is something else altogether when a formation's in combat. So who is he and what experience has he had up to this point?
Yeah, so he's a priest in civilian life. He's actually chapel rather than C of E. Is he Presbyterian or Methodist? I think he might be Methodist. I can't remember. But anyway, he's at the start of the war, he's volunteered. He's ended up being in India. He gets very ill and this affects his hearing. So he gets sent back home, but pleased to be allowed to rejoin and joins the joins 8th Armoured Brigade in the training period for D-Day and gets attached to the Sherwood Rangers in the spring of 1944. The role of these Padres is, yes, it is absolutely to do church services and all the rest of it, but it is also to provide, be a psychiatrist effectively, be a kind of sort of shoulder to cry on, be someone that the men can go and talk to, get some words of solace. And also, I'm afraid to say, the more macabre side of things, it is to oversee the burial of the dead. And this is something that Skinner takes very, very seriously. And he makes it his absolute avowed intent to always do the burying himself. He doesn't think that frontline troops should have to bury their own comrades. He thinks it's bad enough as it is, what they're having to go through and what they're experiencing, without them having the morbid task of having to kind of put aside their kind of mortal remains. And he keeps a diary, and he also keeps a noted casualty book, and he keeps little sketches of where he's buried people, because what happens is you bury them, you then take off one half of their dog tag, you register where you've buried them to the graves registration people, they get disinterred later on and then put in the kind of communal cemetery. So and he's just one of the legends of the Sherwood Rangers at this stage of the war. He's much loved. He's just one of the great characters, and his diary is full of pathos, empathy, sensitivity, and fortitude at what he's having to put himself through. I mean, he's a remarkable man. And although he's not at the front line, he's constantly putting himself in danger and constantly having to be told off. Don't go and recover that body yet, you idiot. We haven't secured this bit. And he goes, no, I must get them back and all the rest of it. So he's very dogged, very tenacious, and just a remarkable man.
Does he recover everyone?
All but one. He just can't find him. And he keeps going out and trying to find him, and he just can't. It's clear that this guy's just been obliterated, So
There are still Padres, but there are also welfare officers now in the army, aren't there? And I think he's probably, now they've got two people doing one man's job. Is basically what it comes down to.
Yeah, there's also the MO. There's the medical officer, Dr. Young. Yes, and the two of them work very closely together. Skinner is often helping the MO, with casualties and so on.
So we were just about to land H-5, weren't we, Jim? One of the LCTs that was in the wrong place, heading towards Omaha Beach. The other LCTs had decided to, because the sequencer's out, had decided to go back round and let the infantry go first. So the initial proposed armoured assault had not gone ahead. But as you approach the shore, as they come into shore, it's the moment for personal kits to be stowed away, chocks holding the tanks in place against the ocean swell to be removed. This is it. It's the moment of truth, isn't it? And we talked to the earlier episode about the inevitable delay that comes with the weather delay. Like, how on earth do you fire yourself up once, stand yourself down, and then fire yourself up again? Is there any, there's only so much adrenaline the human body can produce, I imagine. One of the tanks is, there's Arthur Reddish in C Squadron, who's getting ready to go. He's named his tank Bardin Kolos.
Well, so Reddish is a terrific character. He's in Stuart Hills's tank. You may remember that in the first episode we mentioned Reddish. He's 22. He's from Lancashire. Stuart Hills was the one whose parents have been interned in Hong Kong and is great friends with Dennis Elmore. And Stuart is Arthur Reddish's CO. His tank commander and troop commander. And they have a new CO called James Darcy Anderson. And Anderson is the one who says, right, we're going to name all the tanks, and we're going to name them all with, they're all going to be named after something beginning with the letter of the squadron, so A, B, or C. So Bardin Kolos is kind of, stretching it a little bit, and he's absolutely convinced that he's called it this. Yeah, suggests. He says it's an Arabic phrase which he's picked up in North Africa, which suggests that the tank would become a casualty soon. And everyone thinks this black humour is quite funny. They don't seem to mind this. But there's quite a lot of dark humour going on with the DD tanks, as you can imagine. And there is one guy also in C Squadron, in Peter Soleri's squadron, who we also mentioned last time, who refused. He was a sergeant, and he was a really, sound man and had been through the yards in North Africa and much stuff. He simply refused to get into a DD tank. So he got demoted into the ranks. Captain Bill Enderby, who is the C Squadron second in command, gives the order to launch at 07:45, 700 yards from the shore, and he listens into the regiment's radio net, and he can hear Stephen Mitchell, who is the C Squadron leader, yelling whoever it is who's using the same frequency. He goes, "Get off the fucking air, I'm trying to fight a battle." I mean, you can just imagine, can't you? This sort of mayhem going on. They've made this decision, as you remember at the end of the first episode, that they're not going to be they're not going to be sent in first. It's too rough, which means they need to get in closer, which means they need to come in after the infantry, not before the infantry. And so as they're launching at 700 yards rather than 3 miles, 700 yards, trust me, feels like a very, very long way. I mean, after all, that's more than a third of a mile, isn't it? It's like 2/5 of a mile out. It's mayhem. Enemy shells are starting to kind of splash around the water, both, artillery and mortar shells, rockets are whizzing about. And, the Sherwood Rangers, they're new to amphibious operations. Like a lot of people, they haven't been in Sicily. They haven't landed in Northwest Africa. They haven't done any commando raids. This is all brand new, despite all the training. And at 07:50, the ramp lowers on the C Squadron leading LCT. Gold Beach is ahead. Very difficult to see what's going on. They start to drive the tank out, but the chains holding the ramp is loose, and tightening stakes takes another 5 minutes. And that makes them a sitting target because, you know, they're just waiting there with the ramp kind of half down. Shells fall into the water directly in front of them. Bill Enderby is immediately wounded by shrapnel. So Stuart Hills, 19 at the time, orders the crew to roll the tank further forward, engages the propellers, is now in the sea, but is rapidly taking on water. And Reddish clambers inside and spots a leak. And Hill calls for all the crew to immediately abandon the tank. I mean, can you imagine?
After all that training, all that preparation.
But just imagine you've got the sea rocking around all over the place. You're in it, spray is coming over. Shells are exploding nearby. You're in a 30-ton tank. It's 700 yards out, and it's starting to sink immediately. Absolutely terrifying.
But they do have a dinghy, though, so they're able to make it into the dinghy, and luckily they escape with their lives. But all their stuff, all their personal kit, all the stuff they've brought with them for the campaign, goes down with the Sherman. So I'm not saying that's the most important thing, but that would leave you mighty miffed, wouldn't it?
Stuart Hills is his parents. You know, the one photograph he's got of his parents, who was, you know, somewhere in an internment camp, courtesy of the Japanese. That's gone. Then
Jack Holman, who's the brother of Dick Holman, who we met before. He's the second captain in C Squadron. And amazingly, in a different tank, he does get to the shore in his. That's something that's something in itself, isn't it? But then there are beach obstacles, and I think if you're familiar with pictures of the D-Day beaches, there's mines on the end of obstacles. There's stuff designed to disrupt landing craft landing or make any approach. And there's these logs, essentially, that are half buried with a mine on top. And the idea is you ram the mine and the mine goes off. This is what you've got to then, having come ashore in your DD tank, which is perilous enough, you then have to find your way through these obstacles. And of course, you're under fire. I mean, it's all terrible, isn't it? And on the west of the coastline, to the west, are these defensive strong points. Because we mentioned in the opening reading WN36, which stands for Widerstandnester, which is a German defense strong point. And they're numbered all the way along the Atlantic Wall. The Allied bombing is supposed to have dealt with these strong points. It's supposed to have come in, removed them, or suppressed them at least, and it hasn't.
No, I mean, lots of pot marks all over the place.
When people talk about on D-Day, they say, oh, you know, the one of the things that went wrong at Omaha is the airstrikes are ineffective, right? That the air intervention ended up in the wrong place, is ineffective, and that's part of what went wrong at Omaha. Well, the air intervention here wasn't particularly effective either, is the truth.
No.
The type of assault that the British are trying to pull off here is quite different to what the Americans do, because it's got this spine of armour to help.
So basically, you've got Aramarch, where the cliffs dip, then the cliffs rise again, and then they drop down, and you've got this really long beach. I mean, you and I have beetled all around Gold Beach, so we know what it's like, don't we? It's kind of, it's really flat land behind it. So you've got the beach, which is a very deep beach. Then you've got the seawall, which is this kind of a rise up to dunes. Behind it, you've just got a whole load of sort of marshy stuff. It's marshland and dunes and that kind of thick dune grass and so on. And then behind that, perhaps, you know, varying between 50 yards and a few hundred yards, you've got the lateral road, which runs parallel to the shoreline. The Germans aren't manning every single stretch of this line. They're manning bits of it. So where there is a road or a track coming down to the beach, that is where the strong points are. And on the western side, you've got WN Widerstandnester 37, and this is at a little hamlet called Le Hamel, and there is a concrete casement there with a high velocity anti-tank gun, French anti-tank gun, I think it's 76mm, in the casement pointing down the beach. It's not pointing out to sea, it's just concrete facing the sea, but there is an embouchure pointing straight down the sea, the beach eastwards. Just round a kink in the coastline is where the next road comes to the coast, and that is WN 36, where there is another strong point. And the idea is that the Hampshires will attack Jig Green, which is where WN 37 with this 76mm anti-tank gun is pointing down the beach, supported by B Squadron of the Sherwood Rangers. And that the Dorsets will attack WN 36, supported by C Squadron of the Sherwood Rangers. And then A Squadron will come up with the reserve, which is the 2nd Devons. But it doesn't work out like that, inevitably. So what happens is everyone is pushed eastwards because of the wind. And what happens is the Hampshires land in the sea to the east of WN 36. So they're not even in line with 37, which is half a mile to the west. They then get out and then dogleg backwards. So C Squadron managed to land even further east of them, of both the Hampshires and the Dorsets, who are on the left-hand side, eastern side of where the Hampshires are lying. So everything has shifted 800 yards to the east, basically. That's what's happening. Except some of the tanks from B Squadron, who land exactly where they're supposed to, on Jig Green, rather than Jig Red, which is the next section of the beach. I hope that's sort of reasonably clear. All you need to keep in mind is that all the infantry has moved 800 yards to the east. So has C Squadron, but B Squadron hasn't. It's mayhem, because no one can see anything. There's smoke, there's carnage, there's mist, there's drizzle, there's sea spray.
Yeah, and this is demonstrative of the chaos that this landing has all around it. Now what happens, though, is this means the officers have got to figure out what to do, not according to plan. This is where initiative really has to kick in. You've got this great big complex plan. It's all basically all gone out the window already. It's already all gone out the window.
And they're just having to kind of manage with the situation that's presented to them. And I love the kind of, Jack Holman writes this note. He is one of the ones that is let out at kind of 700 yards or whatever. So he's in his DD tank. He actually makes it. And he's trying to give directions to the driver, who can't see anything, via the intercom and by poking his head above the parapet. Of course. And he says he feels like a coconut at a coconut shy. Only one wished one were as small as a coconut. In all, 5 of C Squadron's tanks get sunk. And meanwhile, B Squadron lose 3, one of which is Bill Wharton's. And we mentioned Bill Wharton in the last episode. He was the one who wrote that rather lovely letter to his wife just on their eve. And he manages to swim to safely, but 3 of the other troopers go down with the tank. And the only reason he managed to get out is because he's standing on the top of the turret. But in another LCT, landing craft tank, is Lieutenant Monty Hawley. Hawley and his co-driver, second gunner, is Bert Jenkins, who's 21. And Jenkins is not, again, he's not another guy from the Shires. He's from Brixton in South London. He's a keen musician. He's joined the Royal Armour Corps age 16 purely because he'd heard it had a big band, and he serves in Egypt for a bit and then joins B Squadron, fights with them through the North Africa campaign. They have a shocker because they get to the beach, all right. They are the only tank that lands exactly where they're supposed to be, which is almost right on WN 37, which is where there is this 76mm French anti-tank gun pointing straight down the beach. And the problem you have is when you land in these DD tanks, you have to stop, disengage from the duplex drive and put it into manual drive. And at that moment, you're a kind of sitting duck. And they are about, do you remember we paced out, didn't we, where Monty Hawley's tank had come ashore? And boy, it's really, really close to that concrete casement, isn't it? And anyway, they get hit, and suddenly the canvas surround is on fire. And they're thinking, oh my God, the tank's on fire. But then it goes out because it just burns to the ground and sizzles out in the water. But that then makes them a massive sitting duck. And they're hit.
I ducked to the ground and scrambled around the back of the tank and hid by the propellers. And when things had calmed down, I looked around and the other 2, Morley and Jesse Warboys, were lying down dead where we'd just been standing. It was terrible.
Absolutely terrible. And another B Squadron tank has another shocker as well. They're a little bit further they're about another 100 yards or so to the west of where Hawley comes ashore. And a shell plows straight through the 3-inch steel of the turret, severing both the legs of Sergeant Bill Digby, who's the tank commander and still inside the tank. So his body collapses into the turret of the tank. He's bleeding absolutely everywhere, pleading for morphine. The driver's frantically trying to pull away. The tank then gets stuck. Everybody manages to get out, but the tank is absolutely knackered. Digby's lifted out and taken to cover behind another knocked out tank right at the edge of the dunes. And some of the tanks that are knocked out are also these specials, these AVREs, which have come ashore to try and clear a passage through the dunes where there's mines and wire and so on. And Digby is just just bleeding out there. And everyone's going, where the hell are all the infantry? And of course, there's no infantry there at all because they're just round a kink in the corner of the coastline at WN36. They're all supposed to be at WN37 and storming that casement, but they're not there. So the tanks are on their own. And tanks are there to support the infantry, but the infantry need to support the tanks and be the eyes and ears on the ground. And without them, they're incredibly vulnerable. And this is what happens there. I mean, it's just an absolute shocker.
The plan is now not what's occurring, is it? They're meant to be working symbiotically and they're not. Had the weather been better, this would have turned out differently. I don't know, because also the enemy is quite capable of disrupting things. And if the weather's better, the enemy has a clearer shot, right? And better visibility to see them coming. So it swings and roundabouts, isn't it? To say, well, maybe if the weather had been better, they'd have landed in a more coordinated fashion. We just don't know, do we? Well, the Germans aren't sure they're coming, to be sure, to start with, because of the weather, are they? So obviously you change one factor, it changes for everyone, not just for the Allied side. Germans might have been in a higher state of readiness if the weather had been better, if you see what I mean. You can't be too certain that things would have worked out peachy had it been a nicer day.
That is true. I mean, you know, one of the consequences of this is that the WN36 is overwhelmed in pretty quick order. And what it also means is that when a squadron follows up, it gets ashore pretty much okay. I mean, okay, so Leslie Skinner's on an LCT where a guy gets hit by a shell and, you know, loses a leg and stuff. But for the most part, most of a squadron get ashore. Apart from those 5 tanks that get sunk, the rest of C Squadron gets ashore. And the reason is because WN36 is knocked out pretty quickly. Where they are is just around a kink. So that very, very problematic anti-tank gun facing down the beach at La Hamel, you know, 800 yards, half a mile further to the west, isn't directly a problem to those landing at WN36. But what you do need to is you can't push inland and clear those strong points on the hill until you have knocked out this gun emplacement at La Hamel, because it's got enough swing in it that it can attack the lateral road, which runs parallel to the beachfront. So until you've got that, you're absolutely, you know, everything's being jammed up in this one area slightly to the east of WN36. So it means that the landing for subsequent waves is quite safe, but it doesn't solve the problem of how to kind of neutralize WN37 where this anti-tank gun is. And it doesn't make life any easier for B Squadron, who are landing in drips and drabs on their own without infantry support on Jig Green by WN37. So the idea was that the Royal Engineers would create these 6 passages through the dunes. I think they've got 1 on Jig Green and only a couple on Jig Red. The congestion is very, very, very quickly building up. Yeah, so this is why Skinner is getting ashore in the way he is at kind of 8:30, because of all this congestion. This is what he's coming into. He is also landing to the east of WN36, which has now been neutralized for the most part, but it doesn't mean the shells aren't coming down from the gun positions on the top of the cliffs further to the west. And, you know, they're certainly not out of danger. And, you know, he is, having got off, you know, he's already been clunked in the side. He's probably cracked a rib or something. He's managed to get off, and they're trying to clear a route through the mines and get a route to this lateral road, and he just pitches in. And you should be Leslie Skinner from now on.
Heavy work with pickaxe and chest, hurting like hell. Finally got half track in queue. Another standstill. I mean, if your Padre's joining in, you know, the pressure's on, right?
Meanwhile, so Stephen Mitchell, who is the C Squadron commander, he is great mates with Stanley Christopherson. They're kind of soulmates. They're absolutely besties. And they've you know, forged a bond of mateship back in 1940, and they've been through the whole thing. They've been together into Brook. They've trained on tanks together. They're absolute besties. Stanley is listening to this as he's coming in the follow-up wave with A Squadron. He's listening to the radio chatter and trying to wondering what's happening to his mate and happening to B Squadron and C Squadron. And he then hears Stephen Mitchell cursing on the radio net and thinks, well, at least he's okay. At least he's still alive. And they eventually come ashore. I think A Squadron are all ashore by, 9:30, 10 o'clock, something like that. And they've made it. And the amazing thing about all of this, and what we'll do is on one of the live streams that we have for our subscribers, we'll go through all the aerial photographs of D-Day, and you can actually see individual Sherwood Rangers tanks on the beaches, in the little villages, on D-Day from these photographs. It's absolutely amazing. And one of the tanks you can see in these photographs is Monty Hawley's tank knocked out. You can see it. It's absolutely incredible. And it means that by using these photographs that were taken on the day with the recorded information and diaries and naval reports and everything else, plus photographs taken later on in the day, plus Google Earth, you can start to map out exactly where everyone came ashore. I mean, literally to the last 20 yards. And it's possible to work out exactly where A Squadron came ashore, where Leslie Skinner came ashore, where Stanley came ashore. And the interesting thing is that some of B Squadron do get ashore successfully on Jig Green and make it inland.
The issue is, having dealt with these Widerstand Nester, 36 and 35, this 77mm gun at La Hamel is still enfilading the beach. So as long as it can enfilade the beach, they aren't going to be able to push on properly or in full strength and get inland and get through the crust, because it's all about getting through the crust, isn't it? Having come ashore and with everything beginning to sort of end up arse about face is, I think, the best way of putting it. If you're and people not coordinating or as expected or as planned, and the idea of combined arms ops here really not happening. The schedule's disrupted, so then what you're going to do is disrupted, which further disrupts the schedule, which further disrupts what you're trying to do.
Which then disrupts the disruption.
Exactly, and problems compound one another when you've got a plan that's sort of 5 minutes before. I was 5 minutes before HA. I think, well, maybe 6 would be all right. Like one of the things with plans and war diaries is people in the war diaries at the end of the day when they're exhausted tend to write, well, we were bang on time, or we were 5 minutes late. And they don't really know, and they don't really know, and it kind of doesn't matter because the whole thing's a great big combined organism. But we offered you before we went to the break the issue of La Hamel and the fortifications there and the French anti-tank gun that's enfilading the beach. That means really, actually, the beach is not secure at all because it's vulnerable to anti-tank fire. And in the last episode, we met Peter Celeri, who's a wine merchant, urbane, of Italian descent, chatterbox, essentially.
Well, he got lost. Do you remember? They got cut adrift from the rest of the squadron,
and they've broken signal silence by signalling to some other ship to say hello, we're an allied ship. And I think it's rather reassuring that the other ship signals back going, yeah, okay, no problem, rather than turn that light off.
They land on Jig Green. They come in quite a bit after Monty Hawley, and they get across. They get off without being knocked out by the 77mm gun, and he heads down the lateral road towards Asnell. He managed to get away with it, him and his troop on his LCT. So there's kind of 4 of them heading due south towards a little village of Asnell.
Asnell, and the road from there to Ree leads on to Bayeux. So this is actually your main artery off the beach. So having secured the beach, you've got to then secure this conurbate, this small village at La Hamel and Asnell that is actually potentially somewhere that could completely block your egress from the landing.
Yes, but you've also got to get those strong points on the hill because west it climbs again, and there's a whole load of strong points on there who are continually firing down onto the invasion. So they also have to be clear. So what you need to do is you need to fan in and clear southwards, but you also need to fan westwards as well. So it's basically there's 2 kind of parts of what they have to do.
As part of 8th Armoured Brigade, we have the Essex Yeomanry. So similar deal in a way is that they're TA soldiers too, who are in priests, aren't they? Which are Sherman chassis essentially. 105mm.
They're sextons, aren't they?
Are they sextons or priests?
I think they're sextons.
Yeah, I think you're right. They're sextons, and the sexton, that's a Canadian Sherman, isn't it? With a 25-pounder in it. A fantastic piece of kit because it's self-propelled artillery. You haven't got to drive in with a limber and park the truck. You pull up and you get going.
But they have come ashore on Jig Red. So Jig Green is the bit where Monty Hawley's come ashore, where the 77mm anti-tank gun is. Jig Red is WM36, where the vast majority, where all the infantry have landed. And they have come ashore kind of in the same neck of the woods as A Squadron. So this stretch eastwards of WM36. And they have got a path has been cleared through the dunes, and they've managed to get onto the lateral road, and they're pushing due west down the lateral road, which runs parallel to the beach. And in the leading sexton is Sergeant Bob Palmer, and he's pushing down the road, and they're hit in the tank by one of the 77mm guns, by this 77mm gun at the Hamel, but no one is hurt. Captain Warburton, who is who's one of the commanders, one of the officers in the Essex Yeomanry, and his battery is attached to the Sherwood Rangers. Captain Warburton asked Palmer to examine the gun casement. So he says, look, we got so Palmer's up front, behind him is Warburton. Warburton says to him, look, Palmer, the line stops because this 77mm is hitting everything. And so they kind of reverse back a little bit. And he says to Palmer, can you just go and check out this casement? Because we're going to, how dangerous is it? Do we need to take it out? What the hell's going on? So Bob Palmer jumps out of his sexton, runs behind a little bush, has a look at it with his binos and thinks, oh my God, yes, this is an absolute nightmare. We're going to have to do it. But there's no infantry down there. He can't see any Sherwood Rangers tanks. So he just thinks, well, we're going to have to do it ourselves. So he thinks, okay, fine. Well, what we're going to have to do is this. He runs back to his sexton, decides that speed is going to be everything. So he tells the driver, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to hurtle down towards this road. We're just going to go hell for leather down the lateral road. And at a certain point, we're going to stop, pivot the sexton, and direct fire. We're just going to try and hit it as much as we possibly can through the aperture. And that is exactly what they do. They hurtle down as fast as they possibly can, kind of rising up to 30 miles an hour, stop only about 75 yards from the gun position. Just at that moment, the embouchure of the gun is facing down the beach, not towards the lateral road. They pause, angle the sexton. First shot hits the just above the embouchure, and if you go to the Hamel today, you can still see where that first shell hit. There's a big dent just above it, and the second one straight through it, knocks out the gun, boom. And that is somewhere between 11 and 11:30 a.m. on the morning of D-Day. And we can pinpoint this because of those aerial photographs that I mentioned earlier on. And you can see where a whole load of armoured vehicles is proceeding down the road to Asnell, which would not have been possible had that gun still been firing.
I mean, it's an amazing bit of shooting, isn't it? They're an experienced outfit, the Sherwood Rangers Yeomanry. They know their business, but their business is completely different now because they're in close country. They haven't done the detour in Italy where there's close country. They've gone basically straight from really a little bit of close country in Tunisia, but from desert fighting with wide open spaces where distance and range are the things that dictate your encounters, to narrow streets, villages, fortified villages, the business of fighting your way in quite a different terrain to the thing they're used to. So you think not only have they got to get their heads around landing and the delay, they've also, and then landing and it being everything being discombobulated and out of sync, they are now in quite a different fighting environment to anyone that any of them have experienced. And the SRY are lucky they have a body of experienced people who know what battle's like, but not this kind of battle. And I think you can't underestimate the stuff that people are just having to sort of digest within the morning, within that first morning. When people go, the British Army, they were like this, that, and the other on D-Day. They were a bit like this here and a bit like that there. You think, yeah. Fine. Of course they were, because there's just so much to have to deal with. Training will only get you so far for this set of circumstances, and then you're basically down onto how much initiative the people in charge have got.
Exactly that. And again, I keep referencing these aerial photographs, and we will show them. But there's one you can see where there's 4 DD Sherman tanks going through the village of Asnell, and there's not a single infantryman anywhere to be seen. You can see where they've come across, because what's happened is they've gone directly south from the beach. They crossed the lateral road. They haven't tried to go down the lateral road. They can't possibly go down the lateral road because there's a massive shell crater there, and also there's the threat of this 77mm gun until this point. And this is sometime between 10:30 and 11 a.m. in the morning, so before the Hamel is knocked out, you can see these 4 tanks moving through the village of Asnell. They've gone down into the fields to the west of the village, cut in. There's a single tank that's been knocked out at that point by something, whether it's a mine, whether it's a shell, whatever it is, whether it's just conked out. But anyway, it's abandoned. You can see it. They then cut into the village and then weaving through the village. And you can see that the guy on point who's leading is, 75 yards ahead of the other 3. That is Colin Thompson's. He's a troop leader from B Squadron. That is his troop going through the village. They are then followed independently by Peter Saleri and his troop, and they end up going through Asnell out the other side to the west, and then turning back northwards again towards going across an anti-tank ditch that's or weaving around it. So they're getting behind the bunker with the 77mm gunner, and they then attack what is a sanatorium, a kind of like a health spa, which has been reinforced and has got guns and machine guns in it. And Saleri is moving forward, and this gun position, this heavily reinforced sanitarium, is holding them up. And it's at that point that an AVRE comes forward and blows it to pieces with a flying dustbin.
Yeah, I think we definitely can. For those who don't know what we're talking about there, because, flying dustbin is such a fantastically evocative name. A petard mortar, which means a mortar fired not by its barrel, but it's a prong. The barrel is essentially in the weapon. So it sits on a thing and fires off the prong. These are these great big charges that are stuck on these adapted Churchill tanks. They're aptly named. And the idea is that the Churchill, grinds its way up to the obstacle, and it's very, very heavily armoured, the Churchill, fires its flying dustbin, obstacle is basically vaporized, and then you can continue. And the AVREs, they've been prepared for this exact eventuality, and here they are being very, very effective.
Well, and Peter Saleri gives this fantastic description of this. He said we were following behind this AVRE, this moves up at point blank range, fires it, and he said the whole building just collapsed in front of them, and they were through. That was it.
They've unblocked the Hamel essentially, and they're going to be able to start to move on. There's people on the beach, aren't there? Dead bodies everywhere. And you've Bert Jenkins, who's still lying on the beach next to the bodies of Warboys and Hawley, who says, it wasn't until late in the day I heard others come, but they had been way down a beach. Everybody was way down. And he's finally recovered and finally taken to an aid post. I was given something to drink and a blanket, because I was all wet and covered in sand, and I was put with a lot of other blokes who'd also lost their way. As they're moving on, they're beginning to recover people. And meanwhile, we left Stuart Hills with his crew.
And Arthur Reddish, yeah.
In a dinghy. They haven't got any paddles.
They're just flapping around,
They're watching all this as they sit there out on the surf, the shells screaming in both directions, shell fire coming from either direction. They're watching the LCTs getting smashed about by the waves because this is the thing about an LCT is, yes, it can come in and deliver tanks to a beach, but it can only do that by virtue of drawing not very much and very difficult to control. It gets blown over like if you're in a dinghy and you haven't put the centerboard down, it'll just get blown sideways by a sideways wind. And they see tanks and they see AVREs burning on the shore, and have this incredible spectacle laid out in front of them in a dinghy they can't navigate. Surely think it was only a matter of time. 2 shells then fall in very, very quick succession close to them, and really fortunately they're rescued. Someone speeds over and grabs them and hauls them onto a landing craft just as they escape the dinghy. A 3rd shell lands pretty much where it was, so a very, very lucky escape. And it must surely have felt like exactly that. You'd be thinking, yeah, we didn't drown with the tank. We didn't get capsized in our dinghy and go to the bottom. We didn't get shelled. Here we are. Fortunately, we've been hiked out at the very last moment. From the deck, they watch this attack at the sanatorium. They watch the AVRE go in, and Peter Saleri's DDs going in and brassing up the sanatorium. What a spectacle that must have been.
Just unbelievable. And actually, Saleri then pushes on. He and his troop, they then push on up the hill and clear WN79 that evening too, which is one of these strong points that are on the hill to, above the cliffs to the west. The moment these guns are overrun, the threat to the Jig sector is basically gone. But at one of the guns, they found 124 empty shell cases just at one of the guns up there on the top of the hill. It's quite a lot. So the Sherwood Rangers so this is sort of, mid-afternoon, early evening. They're still clearing to the west, but they're also pushing southwards. They're going to these, they're going through Asnell, then they're going to Rise, and they're starting to come together to support 56th Infantry Brigade, which is part of the 50th Division, the Tyne Tees Division. They do this at Le Bouhot, which is a small little village, sort of hamlet, between Asnell and Rauray. And at this point, it's kind of, Christopherson and A Squadron's turn to sort of take the lead. B Squadron and C Squadron have done the hard yards and sort of helping to clear the beaches and everything. Now, A Squadron is pushing through. So Stanley Christopherson, who's the A Squadron commander, arrives expecting to link up with Lieutenant Colonel John Higson, who's from the 4th Essex Infantry Battalion. But he can't find him anywhere. Some troopers tell him that Higson's several miles up the road. So he thinks, God, well, how am I going to get up there? Because the roads are absolutely chocker now with vehicles. How on earth is he going to possibly get there? And he gets up with his amazing solution, doesn't he?
Well, he spots a horse. There's a fully saddled horse just standing there outside a house. I mean, it's too good to be true, isn't it? And of course, they went to war. That iteration of the SRY went off to war as cavalry, as mounted cavalrymen with sabres and everything. So it's perfect, isn't it? It's
yeah. Never in my wildest dreams did I ever anticipate that D-Day would find me dashing along the lanes of Normandy, endeavouring, not very successfully, to control a very frightened horse with one hand, gripping a map case in the other, wearing a tin hat and black overalls.
What a sight he must have made. As a result, he's able to meet up with Lieutenant Colonel Higson. And they see that before them, Bayeux is there for the taking. And Bayeux's what, 5-6 miles inland, isn't it?
Yeah, a bit more than that. Yeah, a bit more. But 7 or 8, I'd say.
Not far, but quite a long way, considering where they've come from that morning.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Well, and again, if you think that Con is 10 miles to the south of the invasion beaches, to do 8 miles is pretty good.
We're not going to start any controversy talk on this podcast, Jim. Higson's not convinced by Stanley. Stanley says, "Look, let's go get Bayeux," and Higson's really not convinced by his plea to attack that night. And I think he's probably right. Everyone's fried. Everyone's exhausted. It's their first day in battle. What you really want to do is take stock, do a head count, get a hot meal into people who are wet, particularly the infantry. It's all very well the tank guys going, let's push on. But I think if you've waded ashore that morning or that afternoon, whichever wave you're in, you've probably had enough for the day. They've done really well, actually. They've overcome the Atlantic Wall. They're through the immediate crust. The Germans have resisted stoutly. There's no doubt about that. 124 empty shells found at one of those guns. It's not that they're not trying, the Germans. And they've secured their flanks. They've dealt with the gunnery that's been molesting the beach. So it's good enough, right? It's good enough for day one. Padre Skinner, Leslie Skinner, is going round checking on the wounded and making sure that the men are okay most of the day. And then, as we said right at the start, we said that, with the MO, with the medical officer, the regimental medical officer, he sort of works in conjunction. So he gets in touch with Young, gets him together, and they look at the guys who they're going to send home and make sure that they're sending the right people home and that everything's under control. I mean, Charles Young, Dr. Young's, the RMO's nickname is something, Jim, and I'm not going to even attempt to explain this. I think you...
He's got 2 nicknames. One of them is Hilda, and he quite likes that, and that's the moniker by which he normally gets known. Everyone knows him as Hilda Young, but he's also known as Bum Shandy, and the reason is because he always roots out shirkers by threatening them with anal examinations. Because that's very simple. We'll just give you bend over, and they sort of, well, actually, I feel all right now. He's very funny. One of the people that's wounded is James Darcy Anderson, the CEO. Who's got out of his tank on the lateral road and been hit. So he's evacuated straight back to Portsmouth and Southampton, rather, and never rejoins the Sherwood Rangers. So they're man down already.
Well, we'll see what happens as a result. So as Bum Shandy Hilda turns up to check up on the men, Leslie Skinner writes to his wife and then goes off to catch up with the rest of the regiment. And he finds regimental headquarters in the field near Somerville. He goes to bed at 11:30 that night. But then regimental HQ is told to prepare to move and to move closer to Bayeux at midnight. And so finally they settle, and he writes, "Bed on ground at 01:30, dead beat. Fell asleep beside a half-track, indescribably filthy."
And that was the Sherwood Rangers D-Day. And it's worth reminding people that this is the single unit in the British Army of more battle honours than any in the Second World War, 36, and 16 won between landing on D-Day and the 8th of May 1945.
See, this is what happens, though, if your personal favourite is like... I like airborne outfits who are in for battle for 3 days. And then have to sit it out for the rest of the year, right?
Well, we were talking about this yesterday, weren't we?
We were talking about this, how much...
And John Frost was actually only in battle for like 21 days.
Probably 2 months in total.
2 months
across the war. But anyway, let's not worry about that. Let's not worry about that. No, and the Sherwood Rangers Yeomanry, and I think this is really, really interesting because of all the sort of formations to light on. I think it's fascinating because they're a TA, they're territorial army, they're yeomanry. Yeah. So they're a by tradition,
weekend soldiers,
militia, essentially, right? Lots of yeomanry end up all over the world in different roles from the ones they started in. So, the Bucks Yeomanry, for instance, are artillery. Some of them are in Burma. Some of them are the discovery of Bergen-Belsen, the Bucks Yeomanry. But the Sherwood Rangers Yeomanry have had a period as cavalrymen in Palestine, riding around in horses. Sabres drawn. Then they're converted to artillery,
massively infradig,
which they don't like, and you know what? I think that's a little unfair on our friends the gunners.
Well, I'd like to say that Stanley Christopherson sees the positives.
Yeah. But that's his nature, isn't it? And then they're put back in armour and they fight in North Africa, and then after that they're brought back. They don't go on to Italy. They don't go to Sicily. They don't go on to Italy. They're brought back for the invasion.
As part of a independent armoured brigade.
And I think what's useful, in a way, I mean, we're going to tell their story, but what's useful about that is it illustrates how the British Army has decided to operate in Normandy. That yes, there are infantry divisions and yes, there are armoured divisions, but also somewhere in the mix, these independent armoured brigades who were sort of, they're not freelance as such, but the idea is they can be used where they're required. They can add their shoulder to the wheel for an infantry division if they need help, or they can be used to plug gaps.
Yes. Well, they have these two approaches, and this is shared by the Canadians, is shared by the Americans. That you have your armored divisions are the corps de chasse. These are the kind of breakout armoured units, and again, rather like the Panzer division, they're not just stuff full of tanks. They're all highly motorised, all arms combinations. And once the gap has been created, these armoured divisions then pour through it and rapidly push on through and take more ground, making advantage of the fact that the enemy is in disarray. But before you get to that, you've got to have the grinding battle. You've got to have the sort of consolidation, the build-up, and then you've got to grind down your enemy and create that breakthrough. And that has to be done with the infantry divisions, supported by vast amounts of artillery. And this is where the independent armoured brigades come in, because they are offering fire support for those infantry divisions. And the reason why the Sherwood Rangers get so many battle honours is because they're always in battle. Because most of the war is the grinding type rather than the fast
exactly
leap of 200 miles.
So let's look at how the regiment itself works. So within 8th Armoured Brigade, Independent Armoured Brigade, there are separate regiments.
Yes. And interestingly, the Sherwood Rangers is the junior regiment. Always is, even though it's more experienced than others that come in. So it goes in regular army in terms of seniority of age, and then it comes the TA afterwards.
Which is how it's always been done.
So they're blue. They're little symbols on their. You have, depending on the squadron, you have a little diamond, you have a triangle, you have a square and a circle. And they're in blue. The middle one is yellow, and the top one I think is red.
That's right, yeah. And in the regiment there are 700 men in the show.
A little bit. It's about 685, I think it is.
But roughly 700 guys in the Sherwood Rangers Yeomanry, but only about half of those are actually in the tanks.
48%. It's amazing how often that 40 to 8, 52 percentage comes up. In
3 squadrons, sabre squadrons.
Yep.
So there's your remnants of the cavalry flavour.
Yep.
A, B, and C squadrons, easy to remember that. And each squadron is 5 troops of 3 tanks.
Yep.
With 4 more tanks in the squadron headquarters. So though those tanks aren't necessarily, there's an observer tank and a radio tank and all that sort of thing.
Yes.
So there's other kit.
We're jumping the gun a little bit here, but by sort of middle of July 1944, that is changing to 4 troops of 4 tanks.
Yeah. Partly because there's new armament coming online as well.
Yes.
Because I think the thing to always remember is everything's permanently in transition. Is that and as the battle progresses in Normandy, they learn how to fight in the countryside there, and they learn what they need. And you've the Sherman 17-pounder upgunned Firefly variant coming onto line.
Yep.
And they have to decide what to do with that. I mean, I think people who know the story, if they're familiar with the Sherman Firefly, they think, well, that's just plugged in right from the start. But actually,
it's not.
It's not, and people don't know what to do with it, and they don't know. Do you have them all together, or do you parcel them out between the different troops?
Well, at this stage, they're kind of like a Praetorian Guard at squadron headquarters. So you have your 5 troops of 3 tanks, and then you have your 4 tanks of the squadron headquarters.
Yeah.
And at this stage, that would be the Fireflies.
Yeah. And this is 95 men per squadron, 15
in tanks.
Yeah, in tanks. In tanks, this is the important thing to remember. 15 men in each troop, five per tank.
Yeah.
In each, and those are the Shermans. And so the squadron has 158 men in total. And with this, you have an armoured recovery vehicle.
Yep.
Which is the thing with the winch and the tow chain.
Yeah, and this is like a sort of bastardized Sherman.
Yeah. Or a Grant even. I mean, I think they're using the old chassis. Yep. And there are ARV Cromwells in other formations. So basically it's an adapted chassis with a kit on it. A scout wheeled armoured car, 5 1500-weight trucks, 12 3-ton trucks, and a single universal carrier. So thank goodness. Fans of the carrier will be relieved to hear there is a carrier involved. What becomes apparent when you start looking at the organisation is that there's the fighty bit, and then there's everything else to make that possible. The teeth and the tail. If you've got 700 guys in the whole of the regiment, but a squadron is 158 men, there's lots of people doing lots of other stuff.
Yeah, well, it's 52%.
Yeah. And in headquarters squadron, there are no tanks. There's 4 4-wheel drive cars.
Yep. So these are Humber Scout cars mainly, rather than dingoes. There's a couple of dingoes as well.
Yeah, 8 1500-weight trucks, another 2 3-ton lorries, another carrier, and 3 motorcycles. And this means you've drivers and clerks and cooks and all that sort of stuff. They're not up front, and what they tend to do is at the end of the day's fighting, they lager up or leaguer up, depending on your preference, and rearm, refuel, re-equip, repair, write their mail, and all that sort of thing. And that's the problem. One of the issues here is of doing that in midsummer. Is it I don't know? When's dawn? 5 o'clock in the morning? 4:30 in the morning?
No. It's all right with like 4, isn't it?
Exactly. So you're standing to half an hour before dawn generally.
Yeah.
So
it's a bit later. It's probably more like 5 because it's double summertime.
Yeah, but still. So you're getting up at 4:30 in the morning, but your last light is at 10:30. Yeah. The demands are incredible, as we'll see. And you've got, they're called echelons, aren't they? So there's
So Major Roger Sutton Nelthorpe he is the commands the echelons, and he's been around since year dot. So he's one of the pre-regulars. He goes out with horses into Palestine in January 1940. He's been there forever. He's like this sort of permanent fixture, and always in that role. And he does it incredibly well. And once you've got someone who's handling the echelons really well, you just don't want to change them. And obviously, they're not quite in the fire. It's always a dangerous job if you're going to war, but because they're not in the firing line, it's a less dangerous job. So that does mean you tend to get some consistency, such as Sutton Nelthorpe. And he's much liked and very good at what he does. So the echelons are further divided into A echelon and B echelon. So A echelon is the ones that's closer to the action. This delivers more urgent supplies, so food, fuel, ammunition. And they also take care of the personal possessions all equipment. So you have a sort of canvas tote bag with all your kit in. They're in charge of that. And then B echelon is further away from the action, and that is that's more like tents, clothing.
It's essentially the regiment's camp, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly that.
They've got everything they need. So there's a light aid detachment, which has there's fitters, there's
LAD,
electricians, there's carpenters, and that'll include a mobile workshop.
Yep.
Winches, tools, everything you need to carry out field repairs to keep the tanks going.
Yes, and a field repair means, that includes changing tracks, pulling out an engine, pulling out a gearbox, putting another one in. So really, bar kind of major surgery, they can all do it in the field. And that is one of the great points about the Sherman tank, that you can do this in the field. It is sufficiently easy.
It's how it's been designed.
That's how it's been designed specifically for that purpose.
The Allies are very plugged into this idea that this is how you run your front. It's interesting because it's often seen as teeth and tail, isn't it? But actually, there's no teeth without the tail. They're the same thing.
Yeah.
And that ratio, if you this is how Churchill gets confused, isn't it? By when he looks at the ratio between teeth and tail.
Yes.
And he goes, why have I got all these men in the army and they aren't all doing fighting?
Yeah, because the whole point is
point is that the whole point exactly. And he doesn't get it.
Yeah.
And the thing is to you've got to shake your thinking down and not think of it like that.
Yeah.
And it is also keyed into a steel not the fruits of the steel not flesh way of fighting a war, which is that basically you've got lots of people involved, but they aren't all in immediate danger. This isn't to say that from time to time B echelons don't have to fix bayonets and
no, absolutely, but they absolutely do. But it's worth reminding people that 14% of the British Army is infantry, and 8% are armoured units, of which only 48% are actually in tanks. So less than 4% are in tanks. But
you don't have this tip of the spear without
no, you don't.
Without the rest of it.
And the comparison really is the Lancaster crew of 7 that has sort of 48 men servicing it on the ground. It's a kind of similar sort of principle.
Exactly.
But the point is that by this stage, they've really worked out the logistics, and a lot of these hard yards have been worked out not earlier in the war, but in the Western Desert. There's that big change in the summer of 1942 where they go, hang on a minute, let's just really reassess everything from the tactical air forces, the Desert Air Force, through to, how you conduct aid farming and all the rest of it. And this is part of the Montgomery reforms. It's not entirely, a lot of the stuff has already been worked out beforehand. But this is part of that principle that you have that long tail, that you've really thought it through, and that you're maximizing your equipment, because getting equipment to the battlefield is really complicated, takes a huge amount of time and effort and shipping space and all the rest of it. So when you get it there, yes, it's expendable, but if it isn't expendable, let's try and keep it on the battlefield.
Yeah.
And because they're, for the most part, going forward, what that means is most of the tanks that are damaged at night, there's very, very few tanks when they're knocked out in a battle are knocked out permanently. Some of them are, they're hit and the turret blows off and everything burns out, and that's that, and it's complete total write-off. But lots of them conk out because mechanical failure, because the track's been knocked out, it hits mine, whatever it might be. And so the whole point of the LADs and the armoured recovery vehicles is to come in overnight, whip them off the battlefield, take them back to the kind of, the A echelon rear areas where the LAD is, the light aid detachment, and get them ready again for the following day. And
it's interesting, isn't it, that what the British are using in Normandy is that they've got the Churchill tank, which is a British tank that basically its evolution is that they're made in a great rush after the fall of France in 1940 and come online in 1941 and are a bit pony and are then
beefed up.
But then no one's built a tank like that before in Britain that size, and certainly not in a great rush. Yeah. And gradually they're beefed up and perfected. So by the time they get to Tunisia in the previous year, they're ready to rock and roll. And by Normandy, the Churchill is a perfected.
It's got the biggest frontal armour of any tank in Normandy
system.
Until the Tiger 2 turns up.
And the crews know how to work it, and the crews can maintain it and all this. Because it's the crews who do the actual on the spot maintenance of tanks. Yeah. They don't take them to a garage in the evening and go, help me out here. It's the crews running the vehicles.
Yeah.
Then there's the Cromwell, which is the British cruiser tank, because the British have this idea of different types of tank for different jobs. Mm-hmm. And
is seriously quick.
And it's really, really quick. If you're into the idea of the tank procurement crisis in Britain is late, but actually they decide we'll get our factories online. We'll be able to produce this in time, and the Sherman can take the strain. And the Sherman, which the Americans are producing in vast amounts, Montgomery really likes because he's had great success with it. So, it's Shermans that, for him, in terms of armour, make the difference at El Alamein.
So large numbers are really helpful because then you've got large numbers of parts.
Yeah.
You've got large numbers of people who know how to use them.
Yeah.
And there's a kind of sort of universality about them.
Yeah. I mean, this is one of the things actually about how this is all organized. Montgomery can write a memo saying, I'd rather have Shermans, thanks very much. And that's what happens because that's his involvement in the detail of what's going on goes down to that. And the 8th Armoured Brigade only use Sherman tanks. The evolution of this thing is very interesting because after all, the M3 Lee Grant has the same chassis, same engine. It's just they haven't worked out how to make a single turret with a big enough weapon in it.
Because they're so late to rearmament.
Yeah, exactly. And there's even a moment where they carry on, where they don't even bother. They've got excess grants. They don't even send them into battle because there's no point. Because changing the factories around is too difficult. I mean, this whole story. We did a podcast a while ago about it, didn't we? About the British procurement tank thing, which I think it explains why we have Shermans in a British formation. Is that the British decide, you know what? They're making tons of them. We'll use them rather than, oh God, we can't make our own.
Yes. I mean, I think the point we're trying to say is don't assume that's a sign of weakness. That's actually a sign of strength.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a sign.
Exactly. It's a sign of coalition strength.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a 30-ton vehicle. They're a medium tank, and of course their weight ties directly to what mobile bridging you can use, because the German tanks, Panthers and Tigers, although they aren't the main effort, the Tigers and Panthers have a very powerful anti-tank weapon with great range of velocity. And the Tigers, the Tiger with his 88mm gun can fix you 2 miles away if you find yourself unfortunate enough to be spotted by the enemy, because they've got to engage you, they've got to see you, they've got to engage you, they've got to fix you and finish you. But the truth is those tanks are not the main effort. It's the more common Panzer is a Mark IV or a Stug, which is a self-propelled gun without a rotating turret. And
I mean, I think it's fair to say, we're fans of a Sherman. Tanks are incredibly complex things, and you want to keep those complex things as simple as you possibly can. And that's where the Sherman, wins huge amounts of points. It's mechanically reliable, which is a huge asset in the battlefield, because the battlefield is incredibly robust. And in Normandy, you've either got mud and wet and lots of grass and, all the rest of it, or you've got it really, really dry and it's really dusty. And all these things that kind of make it, that can affect your mechanical reliability, its durability. But the simplicity of the Sherman can weather all that. It's a bit like the simplicity of the AK-47, which is just very loose. It's not a precision weapon or anything, but it can take a lot of crap. It can take a lot of sort of dust and grit in the breach and all the rest of it. And this is the same principle with the Sherman. But
it has a stabilising gyro on its main gun.
Well, it does.
Yes, it's simple, but it comes with
some sophisticated
features.
And the gun stabilising gyro, what that means is when you're on the move, it's incredibly difficult to fire accurately because you're bouncing up and down, over rough ground or whatever. But the gun stabilising gyro helps counteract that, and it is the only tank in the war that at this stage that has that.
Yeah,
and certainly no Germans.
Yeah. And I mean, I think the thing is after all, the threat to tanks is only other tanks occasionally.
Yes, it's mainly anti-tank guns.
Anti-tank guns is the threat to tanks generally, or mines.
Yeah.
And when you get into it, the number of tanks lost to anti-tank mines is I think
it's far harder than tank on tank.
Yeah. Exactly. So
tank on tank, I think, is about 8%.
I mean, right? The thing, what weve sort of done here is we've done a bit of tank comparison, and we're now telling ourselves that it's irrelevant, because it is, right?
It is really.
To a very great extent, and when you get into the numbers, it becomes of dwindling importance. I mean, it's 49,000 Shermans built. 1,347 Tigers made ever.
Yes.
And
it's also the
6,000
is
Panthers.
so simple. It's just that and the point is, most people in America can drive.
Yeah.
And it's based on the same principle. You have the only thing that's different is the steering. So the steering is and the brakes are with levers. So you're braking off one side to make it turn up another way. But otherwise, it's got a clutch, it's got a throttle, it's got a synchromesh gearbox, which goes 4 forward, 1 back. It's just couldn't be easier. I mean, literally anyone who can drive a car can get into a Sherman and drive it. It's not more complicated. Yeah.
But there is a concern that they need a bigger gun, and we mentioned it earlier with the Sherman Firefly, because the British get to work very, very quickly after first encountering the Tiger in Tunisia. How do you mount the 17-pounder anti-tank gun in a Sherman? And they try all sorts of different things. They try one without any, because the breech of the gun, which is the part you load the shell into the weapon with, is so enormous in a Sherman.
Yeah.
Inside the turret of the Sherman, there sort of isn't room for all its working parts. And they try a version where they have no recoil mechanism, and the idea is that the chassis of the Sherman will take the recoil of the gun, and apparently it's a deeply unpleasant experience to doing, like in a giant ringing bell, basically, as the thing goes off. And then they figure out if they turn the breech on its side, they can actually fit everything inside. They move the radio into a box outside into an armoured box outside the turret, make room for the breech to come back.
Get rid of the co-driver.
Get rid of the co-driver for the ammunition, because the shells of the munitions are that much bigger. And it's just about ready for D-Day. It has the same optics as a normal Sherman, so they haven't changed the sighting mechanism for the gunner to take into account the new gun. But there it is. It's there and it's ready, and it's an incredibly effective.
Yeah, and it's got a velocity which exceeds the 88mm, Pack 36. So it's Pack 43. Yeah. So it can do 3,200 feet per second. Which is nice.
And I think the thing is with the 17-pounder itself, the man-manned 17-pounder it's so heavy, it's so difficult to bring up and get up into position and dig in, because it's the 6-pounder, its predecessor, is man portable. 3 or 4 of you can drag that up to where you need it. You can't do that with a 17-pounder. So what you actually have here is a mobile 17-pounder gun. So yes, it makes a difference to the tank side of things, but it just makes a difference across the board to the anti-tank side of things. It's very clever innovation, and I think the thing with the story of armour is it's always about, look at the amazing German innovations. You think, well, hang on a minute, here's a perfect coalition example. You take the American chassis, British gun, you figure out how to fit it, bosh, there you are, problem solved.
Yep.
I mean, we're flying a flag for Team GB on this one, but there we are.
Definitely flying a flag for Team GB. Yeah, that's pretty good. So it's worth just reminding everyone that the kind of we judge the scale of armies in the Second World War by divisions. Scale of armies has reduced massively, which is why people tend to talk in terms of brigades these days. And basically, there's kind of 3 brigades to a division. That's the idea. But if you think of a division being about 15,000 men, that's about right. And an infantry division, such as the 50th Tynes, which the Sherwood Rangers are supporting on D-Day, that's 3 infantry brigades, each with 3 battalions of 845 men.
Yeah,
divided into companies of 120.
Yeah. And the squadrons fight alongside the infantry battalions.
Yes, but this has a problem.
Yeah.
Because the independent armoured brigade, you would have 1 independent armoured brigade supporting 1 infantry division. And that means that the armoured brigade is always outranked by the division. So you've got a major general commanding an infantry division, but you've got a brigadier commanding a brigade. Then and so how it would work is each regiment would support 1 of the infantry brigades. So again, you've got a half colonel supporting a colonel. Then you've got each squadron supporting each of the battalions.
Yeah.
So you've got a major supporting a lieutenant colonel. So you're always outranked, and that is a problem.
Yeah. Well, so John Simpkin said, now it was all over, we hadn't really thought about what happened next. What does happen next? Because we're ashore. They've got ashore. They've overcome the crust of German defences.
Yep.
It's now, you've got to push inland. The grand scheme is that you've got to secure the road nodal points, particularly in Caen, which is the main city in Normandy on the Allied left flank, so the eastern end of Caen, where there's a shipping canal, where there's a rail head, where there's
it's the sort of hinge as well, really. It's the hinge of the Normandy battlefront. Yeah, you definitely want to get those big nodal points. But basically what they're trying to do is they're all trying to link up as quickly as possible so that you've got these little link spots around where they're landing, and you want those to all join up and push inland. And you want to push inland as quickly as you possibly can, because the more space you've got for air support and creating airfields, and the more space you've got for stores and build-up and all the rest of it, and supplying the front.
Yeah, but we left the SOI poised outside Bayeux, didn't they?
Yes, on the evening of D-Day.
They decided not to go into Bayeux, even though consensus was it was probably doable.
Well, there was a classic example of being outranked. So you had Stanley Christopherson and A Squadron, who was a major, being outranked by I think it was the 4th Essex Battalion, who was a lieutenant colonel, who refused to go and take it that evening when... given half a chance, Stanley would have gone straight in. But instead, they take Bayeux the following day, and they do it very easily. There's only sort of sporadic fighting, and they have the kind of very, very weird experience of passing through the centre of Bayeux, and suddenly a French fire engine hurtles past with the bell clanging because there's been a fire in the southern part of the city. It's just completely surreal.
How bizarre.
Anyway, they push on through, and as they've got to the other side of Bayeux, which has just been taken really without not exactly without a shot being fired, but hardly, instructions come that they need to hurry up and take and form themselves into a battle group of the entire armoured brigade and get their asses up to point 103. And point 103 is a little ridge line just to the south of the village of Audreuil. And weirdly, the battle line is not north-south, which is what you would expect. You'd expect the Canadians on the left flank, Tyne-T's going, it's swinging over because the 12th SS Hitler Jugend are swinging to the west from their start point kind of to the south of Caen.
Yeah.
And the battle line is actually on an east-west divide along the main drag that goes through this village of Audreuil, which runs kind of north to south.
Yeah.
And so you've got the SS on the eastern side, and you've got the Canadians with the DLI, the Durham Light Infantry from 50th Tyne-T's coming up on their flank, supporting them. And the idea is, while this battle is going on this through this village, the 8th Armoured Brigade would swing round the back of them and get up onto this high ground. And they're able to do this because there's a dip in the land. So Audreuil is not on high ground by any stretch of the imagination, but to the west, the ground falls a little way. So if you cross straight over, there's a railway line that runs kind of roughly east-west to the north of the village. If you cross that railway line, then you're in kind of, you're hidden from Audreuil and the fighting in Audreuil. And then you can sort of stealthily get up. And it's very interesting because there's photographs that were taken in the 3rd week of June of this entire area, photo reconnaissance photographs. And you can see Audreuil, you can see point 103, and you can see all these vehicle tracks going across the farmland, the open farmland, to the west of Audreuil. So you can absolutely see the route that the Sherwood Rangers took and the rest of 8th Armoured Brigade to get to point 103. And it's not until you're actually walking that ground that you go, oh, okay, I get it. This is why they've taken this route. And the other thing that's really interesting, of course, is this is still a very, very under-mechanized period for agriculture. And so a lot of these fields, this has been the first time ever that the vehicles would have been across them.
Yeah, amazing. But when you say they're formed into a battle group, what that means is, at the start of this episode, we explained how they tend to operate in a sort of devolved manner, attached to whoever that is required of them. But actually, on this occasion, 8th Armoured Brigade is fighting as itself. And you've the 4th, 7th Royal Dragoon Guards, the 24th Lancers, and the Sherwood Rangers Yeomanry. And that's those were in order there of seniority.
Yeah.
But they're working together, and they've motorised artillery, the 147th Regiment Essex Yeomanry.
Yep.
And motorised infantry, the 12th King's Royal Rifles.
Who are in half tracks on that part.
Yeah. So
American half tracks.
I mean, that makes them sound awfully modern, Jim, doesn't it? When you, really, doesn't it?
Yes.
Makes them sound awfully like the British have fully embraced armoured manoeuvre warfare. But I don't want to go down that route. Cause an argument with anyone. And at 4 o'clock, they set off.
They were much better than everyone reckons. I'm just going to say it.
So they set off at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, and this is the 8th of June now. So this is D day. This is D+2.
And this is, I think, what's interesting here is that, as John Simpkin said, we'd been thinking all about the landing. Now you're in Normandy, and these are people who have fought in the desert and know how to fight in the desert very well. But this is a completely different environment.
Totally different environment. Right. The reason they've only been thinking about the landing is because that's all they've been training.
Yeah.
That's all they can train, because you can't train for this, because there isn't the space in the UK to train in all arms combat across multiple terrains, even though, there is this sort of irony of all the Americans being in southwest of England, in Devon and Cornwall and so on, where there's plenty of bocage.
Well, there's tons of bocage,
but they can't train it because they're just training jumping in and out of assault craft.
In Normandy, it's rolling hills, very often wide open spaces with fields, but then these villages that are all
surrounded by orchards.
But the village and high stone walls, and basically these villages are like plumb sites to fortify and defend. I think I remember the last time we were in Normandy, when we were driving about. I remember we talked a fair bit about this, about actually how defensible it is once you get inland, and the fact that the Germans
flexible defense.
Exactly, but the fact that the Germans offer up this thin crust defense on the beaches
with all their concrete,
rather than a layered defense with these ancient stone villages that half of which are on high ground and are perfectly suited for defense. And when they do invest places properly and defend them properly,
they're hard to winkle out.
They're extremely difficult to winkle out. And so there is a sort of a mystery actually about how much progress the Allies make in the first few days. The Germans kind of haven't really figured out how to defend in Normandy, I think.
No, they haven't at all. And actually, you can see, one can go to the military archives, the German military archives in Freiburg and Breslau in the Schwarzwald, in the Black Forest. And they've got all these training pamphlets, which are constantly being updated as they're analysing, what's going on. And they were saying, the bocage is an absolute nightmare for us because we're not ready for this. We haven't trained for it. Where actually it's a huge advantage because it gives them the flexibility of defence, because you can just always retreat to another field. You can always retreat to another wood. And there's just so much cover in these villages. And all these villages, there's not a single exception in this part of Normandy, are surrounded by orchards, which again give you cover from an infantry point of view, from a grenadier point of view, but also from an armoured fighting vehicle point of view as well. So it's very, very difficult. And the other thing I think is really interesting about all this is that when they're starting their weapons for the war, they're coming up with the 2-pounder, the British, and the Germans have the comparatively small pack gun, the 50mm and so on. And that's because they're expecting the warfare to be fought over comparatively small areas in Europe. And it's only in the Western Desert and in the Soviet Union where you've got huge open spaces that suddenly range becomes a factor. But that's sort of shrinking again. But you've now got the kit for long range in an environment which suits short range. Yes. So there's a kind of sort of irony there, and they're having to adjust to it. And the point about this is everyone knows that they're not going to know how to train. They haven't practiced fighting in bocage because they just haven't, because they haven't had the opportunity to do so. But this is where that experience really comes in, and why Montgomery wants his independent armoured brigades to be predominantly made up of experienced troops, because he feels that their experience is going to be enough to enable them to adapt swiftly to the new environment in which they find themselves. And this actually proves to be the case.
So A Squadron are leading the advance.
Yes.
And it's Mike Howden's tank.
Yeah, he's a splendid fella. He's a lovely chap.
Yeah,
and his gunner is Stan Cox, who's 19 from Didcot, and I got to know Stan. He was hilarious. He'd joined the Sherwood Rangers Yeomanry in January. He is a new guy, and it's an entirely new tank crew inside Bar Howden, who's been around with the Sherwood Rangers for a long time. And Howden's got a stammer, and everyone likes him, but he's quite sort of, reserved and a sort of undemonstrative sort of fellow, and he in his head is stuck above the turret, and he spots a movement in the trees and wonders whether it's a sniper. So he tells Cox to fire at whatever's rustling, and he means just give him a blast of the coaxial machine gun, but he doesn't. He fires a 75mm gun, sort of massive boom that ends up toppling the tree and taking out the sniper. And Howden has a stammer, so he says, "Bugger, Cox, that was a bit bloody drastic." He was known as Dis Mike, because he always going, "My mic on my tank is a bit dis."
One of the things one of the ways the D-Day campaign gets characterized is either people say, well, the Germans were really badly trained, or they were all elite.
Yeah, there's no halfway house,
right? So. Whereas in fact, there's this tremendous mixture. Wherever the Germans are, there are people from Ost battalions, and there are drafted Cossacks and all that sort of thing, and Czechs,
Mongols,
exactly, and Sudeten
Koreans,
Sudeten Czechs regretting some of their life choices, right? but you do also have Panzer Grenadier people and SS people and Hitlerjugend
and they are trained and motivated. That's
and they're motivated is the thing.
Yeah, I mean, I was trying to think, when you're thinking about the German, you're thinking of sort of performance of divisions. If that's your mean line of kind of, not bad kind of unit. The Allied one is sort of like that.
Yeah. But
the German one is like this.
Yeah.
And that's how to think of it, really.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think that's the case with the Germans across the board, isn't it?
Yeah, probably.
It is that the ones who are good at it are really, really good at it, and the ones who are bad
are very, very bad.
Horrid. Yeah. But it's 12th SS particularly brutal and violent, and have that reputation and aren't fussed that that's their reputation.
And they're proud of their reputation.
Yeah, exactly. So that. SRY, they reach point 103, advancing across the railway line and travelling through these fields, as you described. Yeah. And these villages, these villages that are all so eminently defendable. Yeah. And they there's good cover because there's a sunken track lined with beech trees. So
the track runs across the top of point 103.
Yeah.
Which is a sort of, it's a low ridgeline. It's not a high hill or anything like that. I mean, the clue's in the title, which is 103. So it means it's 103 metres above sea level. And
just remember that from here on in, everyone. That's how these hills work.
That's how it works. and you've got the trees running down the track in a kind of roughly kind of east-west kind of view, and then there's hedged fields which are not particularly large. I would say they're kind of, you're talking sort of 10-acre fields, something like that. And then it drops down, and you can see the roofs of Saint-Pierre, which is a village on one side of the River Searle, and the River Searle curves down in front of it, running kind of east-west, and then it curves and it heads northwards towards the sea. Yeah. So you've got this kind of sort of U-shaped sort of, sort of corner of a square. If you've got 103 is here, there's Saint-Pierre, there's Tilly-sur-Seulles on the other side of the river, and the river runs around like that and comes around. So you're kind of you're on two sides, you're protected by the river. As
so often in Normandy, there's a straight Roman road that links the two villages, Saint-Pierre and Fontenay-le-Pénil, which is a few miles to the east.
Yes.
Because this is one of the features of Normandy, is these great, long, straight Norman roads that
hark back to the days of Caesar.
Well, exactly, and absolutely primary school Roman roads where you look at it and you go, jeepers, no one else,
trees lining them.
Exactly,
it's all
no one else built this.
And when you're there, they could be nowhere but France.
Yeah. So, but the point is, if the British can take and hold point 103, they'll be able to see the enemy push, whether they're pushing through north from Tilly. So they that's what they need.
Well, you always want the high ground.
Stanley Christopherson asks Lieutenant John,
because A Squadron's in the vans.
Yeah. Asked John Bethel Fox, who's the troop leader, to recce Tilly and Saint-Pierre. This is like something out of a film, though, isn't it? The villages are mainly deserted, but an old Frenchman tells Bethel Fox that the Germans were asking him about the British, where the British were recently. And you can just imagine that old Frenchman when the Germans say, I Hitler, the Anglais are over there, like that. And then the British turn up, Winston Churchill, Hitler kaput.
You can see him, he's got a big silvery moustache.
Exactly. He's got a Gauloise on. He's a small, whiny dog. And
all of that.
Yeah. And then Bethel Fox, he actually starts hearing enemy tanks revving. They're nearby.
And this is, in fact, the Panzer
right
arriving. This is Fritz Behrlein.
And these are some of the people who are on the...
Great friend of the show.
Great friend of the show. But these are, when you drew your zigzag of German quality, these are people...
they're probably the best
unit. North of the average line.
They are probably the single best unit in the entire German army that's descending on Normandy.
Okay. So
because they're made up of instructors, basically, right, and veterans.
Right.
And Behrlein himself is extremely competent. They're quite a small division. as divisions go, they're only, they're on the smaller side, and they haven't got the big tanks because they're not SS.
You see, what I'd do, Jim, if I was really hard pressed, is I would take all the people who know what they're doing, the instructors and the people who can train, and spunk them in some great big battle in Normandy, rather than keep them back and use them to train people. And in the meantime, the Padre, Leslie Skinner, has gone back to Gold Beach. Yep. Doing his rounds to check on the wounded. Yep. And we talked about him in a previous episode that
he's such a man.
He believes it is his job to recover and bury every single soldier lost. And he finds that Bill Digby, who'd lost his legs, has been recovered, but he's not expected to survive.
Nor does he.
Yeah. And then there's no news either on Stuart Hills and his crew,
yes,
who went into the drink in their DD tank.
Yes, in their aptly named tank that was, what was it, something Bardos?
Yeah. Yeah. It's just assumed that they've drowned in the chaos. And then he goes back to Bayeux. He joins the regimental headquarters as they start their move up towards Point 103.
Yeah. All the trucks, all the tents, all the...
Yeah. The B echelon, as we and
Sutton Nelford.
And while he's there, Lieutenant Lawrence Werner is brought to him, and Dr. Young at the regimental aid post, and he's been sniped in the chest, and so he takes him to the field hospital, and then rejoins the fighting component, and he writes, "Journey back in dark nightmare."
Don't remember if he's from Yorkshire.
All right, journey back in dark nightmare. Dr. Young had moved again. Found him by 01:30, by which time feeling tired and somewhat faint.
From now on, you are
all right.
Leslie Skinner.
All right, okay, no problem.
You got that.
In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. I'm from Yorkshire.
God be with you.
Yeah, God's county.
All the rest of it.
But and he then has to get up again after 2.5 hours sleep for a new day. And both Werner and Digby, unfortunately, they die shortly after. Right, we're going to take a break because on Friday the 9th of June, a clash between the Sherwood Rangers Yeomanry,
yes, indeed,
and the Panzer is on the cards. Well, Jim, it's only 103 metres high.
Yeah, it's not very tall.
But right now it really matters. Point 103. Really matters.
It's the high ground, and it's going to be their home for the next few weeks, on and off. But what they've got to do is obviously they've got to push forward. They've got to find out who the enemy are. They don't know for sure it's the Panzer yet. They don't know quite what's going on. There's quite a lot of confusion, but they do hold the high ground at the time, and their overall task is to take ground, not lose it. So we're now on D+3. It's Friday the 9th of June. It's misty. It's drizzly. And it's very difficult for a squadron, which is still in the van, in their fields, in their hold-down positions behind the hedgerows, looking down over the slope down towards the rooftops and church spire of Saint-Pierre and Tilly-sur-Seulles. It's hard for them to keep a lookout. And John Bethel Fox and his bestie, Keith Douglas, who is the second in command of a squadron, are given the job by, Douglas volunteers to go down and sort of, again, further kind of recce Saint-Pierre and find out what's going on and what news of the enemy there are and where they are and all the rest of it, because it can't really see from where they are on point 103. And Captain Keith Douglas he's one of the greatest war poets that we've produced. He's a chippy wanker. He is. So he comes from quite a smart background, but his dad was a bit hopeless, ran off, blew all the money. He ended up at Christ Hospital. He got a kind of, scholarship to Christ Hospital. So he is a public school boy, but he's got a massive chip on his shoulder about his reduced circumstances. He's very, very clever. He's also written a brilliant, brilliant book called Alamein to Zemzem, which is still in print and is just absolutely fantastic. Sensational book about the North Africa campaign. And he has he doesn't have quite the easy charm of some of the Sherwood Rangers, and particularly Stanley Christopherson, who he kind of is extremely fond of, but sort of resents, because he resents Stanley's ready charm, ready wit, easy disposition.
I think Keith Douglas is one of those people who, in the end, shies away from sincere expression of his feelings.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Well, he leaves it for the poems.
Exactly. And holds everyone at sort of ironic distance.
Yes, there's quite a lot of that going on.
There's quite a lot of that going on. And the thing is
that quite appeals to me because that's the thing I do a lot of. So, he doesn't want to emotionally commit to anything completely because then he'd have to admit that he might feel things inside and all that sort of stuff.
All that kind of stuff. I mean, it's quite funny because in Alamein to Zemzem, he gives everyone pseudonyms, but they're kind of very, very thinly disguised. So Stanley Christopherson is Edward. And he actually sends a copy of the manuscript to him and asks him to do a kind of foreword for it, which he does. And actually, he's quite sort of narky about him, makes little snide comments about his kind of, basically he implies that he's all superficial kind of charm and got no substance. And actually, what's really interesting is Stanley doesn't take any exception to that at all, but he does take exception to Keith Douglas claiming that he wasn't a particularly good dancer, because that's one thing he thinks he is really rather good at. But anyway, it's and he's also absolutely yes, he said, I consider myself well above the average, and as a result of my protest, he agreed to alter the text. And the book hasn't been published at this point, but before they go to Normandy, he has a quiet word with Padre Skinner.
All right. What do you need to talk about, Keith?
Come on, Keith.
Sit yourself down with a brew.
Sit you down with a brew and let's have it.
I'll take you through it. Yeah, okay. I understand.
Well, the thing is, Padre, I don't think I'm going to make it.
No, don't you worry about that, son. Everyone thinks that. Everyone thinks he's not.
I really think this is me. I think I'm going to be. I think I'm going to be done.
Well, if you do, then you'll be well taken care of in heaven also.
I'll make sure I bury you myself.
Okay, no problem.
Anyway, so he's convinced he's going to die, and it is amazing how often that becomes a self-fulfilled prophecy. But anyway, be that as it may, they are sent down and they go down in their 2 tanks. And they then park them up in the orchard just outside the edge of Saint-Pierre, and decide that they alone will go. They keep their crews. They tell the crews to man the tanks, stay where they are, and they're going to go on foot. So they go around the back of the village down towards the River Soule, and they're crawling along the riverbank. And suddenly there's a burst of machine gun fire, and bullets are flying over their heads. And Bethel Fox keeps a kind of writes a kind of sort of journal of this. He does a sort of extended essay of this entire period, which is actually in the British Library, funny enough. And he writes, with common accord, we turned around, sprinted and dived into the river with bullets flying after us, because there's quite high banks on the river. Not really high, but high enough that you could crawl along it. And they basically crawl along the river, go all the way around, and then get behind a hedge and creep back across to back to their tanks. And in the meantime, while they're down south wrecking, scouting out Saint-Pierre, the rest of A Squadron has moved forward to the edge of a kind of rectangular field lined with trees and hedgerows just below the brow of the 0.103 ridgeline. So it's starting to slope down towards Saint-Pierre. And they then, Bethel Fox and Keith Douglas managed to get back to their Shermans, get back up the hill safely, and managed to leaguer up, get hull down with the rest of the squadron. But they end up in different parts of the field. And Bethel Fox watches Douglas jump down from his tank, and he starts running towards Christopherson, who is sheltering in a ditch. And a moment later, 2 tanks are hit, including Mike Howden's. And the crew managed to get out and escape the tank. And as Stan Cox gets out, he realised that he still had his headphones on. So he says, I stopped to take them off and throw them back in the turret. And I jumped off the back. And as I jumped, he hit us on the left-hand side. And I caught the blast and bits of shrapnel. He's still fully conscious at this time. And he's dragged into the woods by his crewmates. And the tank then catches fire and it starts billowing black, oily smoke. And it keeps burning all after a whole day. This tank is just still brewing up. And mortar shells now start raining down on the squadron fired from the Soule Valley. And Mike Howden is in shock. And as Stan says, Mike's stammer prevented any kind of speech for half an hour, and his complexion was even whiter than snow. I mean, you didn't blame him, frankly. And Bethel Fox is now cowering in a ditch, you have the raised bank, the trees and the hedge on top of it, and then there's quite often a sort of culvert, like a ditch on the other side. Anyway, so that's where they're sheltering. And as he's sheltering there, Christopherson says, "John, I've got some bad news for you. Keith has been killed." And Bethel Fox is just absolutely dumbstruck. He just can't believe it. And he says, "I stared at him and I felt hot tears running down my cheek." He just can't believe it because he's only seen him kind of, 10 minutes earlier. And what's happened is that Douglas has got out of his tank completely unnecessarily and has been killed by an airburst. There's not a single scratch on him.
Gone to have a look, hasn't he?
Yeah, but
What?
What and why? It's just so stupid. They're under fire. Keep your head down, son.
Yeah. But because they've drawn attention to themselves on point 103, the British can establish themselves on the ridge in the meantime.
Yeah.
So for all this, it's worked, hasn't it? Because they're established on the ridge, they can see what the Germans are doing. They've got this. The whole point is to get eyes on possible German movement. So later that afternoon, Peter Sellery in B Squadron spots a German column advancing towards Bayeux.
Yep.
And that means they're able to start bracketing them with fire, laying fire onto them and stopping the Germans making their advance.
It's exactly the reverse. And because the Panzer Lehr, it is indeed them, are trying to do exactly what the Sherman Rangers are trying to do, which is, get to the next ridge.
Yeah. And this just shows that this is why it may only be 103 meters tall, but high ground, being able to see what the other guy's up to is what manoeuvre warfare is all about. The same day as well, Padre Skinner returns to the beaches and going back to the beaches now. Finds Stuart. Stuart, there you are, Stuart Hills.
I thought you were
as I live and breathe, I thought you drowned, my young. You come on, lads. Nice brew and a fag, and we'll sort you out. We'll rustle up a new tank for you as soon as we can. And they're waiting for a new tank, and they'll rejoin the regiment as soon as they're basically mobile. But then he goes back to regimental headquarters and he hears about Keith Douglas's death. And he remembers this conversation that they'd had when they'd gone for a long walk in the New Forest after a church service. And he'd said, I don't think I'm coming back from Europe. It's, the next day, Padre Skinner is allowed to bury Keith Douglas. And when he finds him, he's virtually unscathed. It's one of these blast deaths that,
like the artist Rex Whistler.
Yeah,
he was killed in August.
Yeah,
exactly the same way.
Apparently without a mark on him.
Yeah.
And what he does, Skinner does what he always does, which is he notes down a map reference of where he buries the body.
Yeah, and it's thanks to that you and I were able to work out exactly pretty much to about 20 yards exactly where he'd been killed. We stood on that spot, didn't we?
We did, yeah. And yes, that was a poignant afternoon.
Yeah, it really was.
And I think, this is absolutely extraordinary that Bethel Fox then sleeps in Keith Douglas's sleeping bag that night.
Yeah.
These
intense friendships.
These intense friendships of these people living cheek by jowl in extreme danger. You do get a glimpse into what these people were like and then how they're having to cope with losing each other. It's and he says, to all purposes, he's vanished from our sight. There was one moment, he was there one moment and gone the next. As long as I live and I hope after, I shall feel him with me, alive and watching.
It's really poignant, isn't it?
Yeah. But this means that the dangers of fighting in Normandy, the vagaries of battle are being laid clear very, very quickly.
Yeah, you bet.
And that the terrain, because you're either, the truth is, you're either concealed and then you can't see what the enemy are doing, or you're on a piece of high ground. And if you're on a piece of high ground, it's obvious. This is the problem with bits of high ground. It's obvious you must be there, right?
So you're going to be targeted.
You're going to be mortared. It's like a church tower in every village. It's obvious it's an OP, so it's obviously going to be targeted.
Yeah.
And so you're either somewhere, you're either being watched or you're watching.
Yeah.
And if you're being watched, you're in danger. And if you're watching for the obvious place,
you're also in danger.
You're also in danger.
Basically, it's just dangerous.
Yeah, I know. I've gone around the houses there.
And what they're also realising is that their experiences, even in northern Tunisia, which are to a certain extent kind of southern European, on a whole load of use. But experience is, and that's the point. And that sixth sense you develop, and some of the tricks of the trade, and the ability to kind of, keep your head down, and things which are going to expose you more, and so on. Those are the things which are coming to bear here. But it is unquestionably a very, very steep learning curve. And John Simpkin, who has been the motor officer at regimental headquarters, is promoted and becomes the new second in command of A Squadron. So he's now up at the front. It's the 9th of June, so he's no messing around. And, they've now got to go down and try to get across the River Selle and attack the Panzer which have clearly arrived. So that means going down into Saint-Pierre, and there's a new plan, which is to grind the enemy down, consolidate existing gains. With every passing day, Allied military strength is growing. The bridgehead is strengthening. It's getting harder and harder for the Germans to push the Allies back into the sea. But there's a really, really tough job to be done, because at this point, the Panzer, despite being hit repeatedly on its passage up from the Le Mans area to the Normandy front by Allied aircraft, is at its sort of its front line strongest, as are the 12th SS. So you're coming up against these boys when they're freshest, and so that obviously makes it harder. And it's Stephen Mitchell's C Squadron which is given the job of clearing out the rest of Saint-Pierre. Because these squadrons operate in rotation. It's A Squadron's turn to lead, then it's B Squadrons, then it's C Squadrons. And that's how it works. And you may remember that Stephen Mitchell is Stanley Christopherson's great mate. They've been absolutely super tight since they first joined the Sherwood Rangers together in the autumn of 1939. And as the squadron's second tank rolls through the village, he passes through the farmhouse where the regimental headquarters is going to be based, and a flurry of mortars whoosh in. And this is on Sunday, the 11th of June. So what's happened is on the 10th, B Squadron has pushed down into the village. They've established themselves in the orchard on the edge of the village, the same orchard where Bethel Fox and Keith Douglas took cover the first day, on the 9th. And here they are. It's a farmhouse. And that farmhouse comes with there's a long farmhouse, there's a barn on one side, there's a little wall, and the entrance to it is on the corner, and there's a little kind of sort of courtyard area there. And that had initially been B Squadron's squadron headquarters, and then when regimental headquarters moves down, then B Squadron gets bumped into the orchard, and so they're there. And as C Squadron are pushing down in through the village, these mortars suddenly whoosh in from another part of the village, and basically in the central part of the village there's a great big house. There's one of those sort of chateau types with the sort of slate grey towers and all the rest of it. And the Germans are occupying that. So again, it's this sort of slightly, it isn't a kind of a kind of north-south divide split. It's a kind of one half of the village is in German hands and the other half isn't. And as they do that, these mortars whoosh in and hit the regimental headquarters courtyard just at the moment that the CO and a whole load of others are standing by the CO's tank Robin Hood. And this is Mike Laycock, because James, the original CO, do you remember he'd been, Darcy Anderson had been wounded on D-Day. So Mike Laycock, who's the second in command, had taken over. And he's the first person in the Sherwood Rangers to get a military cross in the war. He gets it at Alam Halfa in August 1942. So he's killed. George Jones, who's a great friend of Bill Wharton, who we mentioned in earlier episodes, is also killed. And it's a terrible, terrible shock for the Sherwood Rangers, because they've now lost their second commander in, a matter of days. And also Laycock is this absolute legend. He's a pre-war guy. He's a doyen of the Sherwood Rangers. He's kind of team hero. He's known for his fiery temper and so on. But this is devastating news. I mean, this is a real shock. So Leslie Skinner is brought in to help move the wounded to Hilda Young's, the doctor's new regimental aid post, flying through, bracketing the position. And Peter Saleri, who's in B Squadron, he's trying to move his fire into his tank so he can position his tank to kind of fire at this big house in the center of the village. And as he does so, he smashes into an apple tree instead, which collapses and then scratches John Hanson Lawson, who's the B Squadron commander, on the way. And everyone thinks this is absolutely hilarious, apart from John Hanson Lawson. He doesn't find it funny at all. But now they're being attacked by all angles, and it's chaos because they're actually slightly trapped in this farmhouse with its walls, and it's all a bit close. And actually, you can go there now and you can see it, and you can see why that would be the case. So there's carnage, there's dead bodies, there's wounded, there's too many voices on the radio, there's infantry yelling from outside the tanks, visibility is limited by trees and hedges, there's smoke. I mean, you can just imagine it, can't you? It's absolutely mayhem. This is kind of sort of half an hour of total chaos, and no one knows what the hell's going on. And meanwhile, C Squadron are advancing down into the main heart of the village. And Stephen Mitchell, from the turret of his Sherman, can see panzers approaching. Orders his gunner to fire at one tank, which hits successfully. Another tank, Panzer, is forced to withdraw. But then Mitchell's own tank is hit twice, and they bail out. And by this point, they have crossed the main road from Tilly that runs along the edge, the southern edge of Saint-Pierre towards Fontenay. And they're in a field overlooking the River Soule. And of course, how the hell do you get out of that? You're in a field. You're basically almost surrounded on where you're covered on three sides by the Germans. You're in big trouble. So it's chaos. They're there with the DLI. It's really confused close fighting that you get with those. Again, you were talking earlier on about the narrow streets with the walls and the buildings, and you can't see diddly squat. Yeah. And now Stephen Mitchell's in this field with only the kind of the riverbank as his cover. Really, it's a nightmare. Yeah. So by the end of the day, there's kind of sort of stalemate in Saint-Pierre. The British the Sherwood Rangers with the DLI have more or less pushed the Germans back out of Saint-Pierre, but not completely. So they've got kind of 80% of it. And no one knows what has happened to... So you've got B Squadron still in the orchards around... dug in around with the infantry holding the kind of the northern end of the village. You've got C Squadron with the DLI pushing down into the village, but no one knows quite what's going on. No one knows what's happened to Stephen Mitchell because he's off the radio, because he's out of his tank, and he's the C Squadron commander. A Squadron is still holding point 103, and as evening falls, the fighting finally dies down, but there's still no sign of or sound of Stephen Mitchell. No one knows quite what to do. So Christopherson takes temporary command of the regiment because Mike Laycott's been killed. Yeah. Because the next most senior man, the next man on the line is Mitchell, but he's missing. And that evening, Christopherson and Skinner both hold the burial service in the orchards for the CEO and the intelligence officer and so on. And it's an absolute shocker, and Christopherson here scrambling at the back of his tank and that evening, grabs his revolver, peers over the turret. He finds Peter Soleri reaching for a half bottle of whiskey that Christopherson's been drinking from. And he goes, "Oh, did I leave my map case on the back of the tank?" Christopherson says, "I don't think so, Peter, but do take the bottle of whiskey." So there he goes, "Thanks, old man."
Yeah, it takes the bottle of whiskey, but it doesn't say, "Oh, you caught me at it."
And I think it's fair to say it's been 3 very, very difficult days. The losses are, they lost a number of men on the 9th, including Keith Douglas, and now they've
the commanding officer.
Now they've had the regimental commanding officer on that Sunday, the 11th of June.
The thing is, when you go there. And you see those villages with like you say, they have these high walls, high stone walls. They're not 2 meters tall, but they're sort of 6 feet tall that channel you. And these villages zigzag as well.
Yes, they do.
So there's always a corner to be going round.
Yeah.
And whether you're on foot as an infantryman or in an armoured vehicle, these places are ideal if you're defending them. And really, really, really hard to attack. And always there's the question, isn't there? The defender sort of has his initiative in his own way, doesn't he? Because he hasn't got to make any decisions. Yeah. He hasn't got to figure out the puzzle in the way that an attacker does. And also, an attacker needs to be 3-1. That's the golden rule, isn't it? Yeah. But the point with that is a successful attack may mean that 2 of those 3-1 are taken out in the process. That it's built around attrition. So there's only going to be this kind of casualty rate, isn't there?
Yeah. When you go to Saint-Pierre, it is incredibly tight and close, and there are lots of limestone walls built up, and you feel pegged in, and you feel more pegged in by these orchards. And it's interesting because you can see photographs, again, these sequence of aerial photographs. The whole area is just completely pockmarked. Yeah. I mean, Saint-Pierre is devastated. There's barely a single building that hasn't been hit. Yeah. It's completely wrecked. But that night of Sunday, the 11th of June, the Sherwood Rangers are in disarray. I mean, they really, really are. They've got a temporary acting CO in Stanley Christopherson. No one knows where Mitchell is, but the presumption is very likely that he's been captured or worse. So that's the second most senior officer in the regiment gone as well. And no one knows what's the hell is going on. They're in a very, very precarious position in Saint-Pierre, holding it, very, very tentatively, and everyone's sort of kipping down for a kind of what is effectively going to be a couple of hours sleep, with nerves taut and tension about as ratcheted up as it's ever going to be. They've suffered quite a lot of casualties on D-Day. Bert Digby, they'd lost people at sea. Then afterwards, a number of crews, including officers such as Keith Douglas, Peter Pepler had been killed as well. Lieutenant Werner, and of course the CO and George Jones, the adjutant, had also been killed. And so already there's quite a lot of churn. Yeah. And that means you need replacements. Yeah. And you've got new guys coming in all the time.
Well, coming in immediately. I think this is what's really interesting, isn't it? Is that I think perhaps in people's minds is the idea that the replacements come in, a couple of weeks into things. But as we're going to see, the replacements are on a permanent flow into units. Yeah. Pretty much as soon as they need them at this stage of the war, aren't they? Which brings us to David Render, who joins ACE, and he's 19 years old. He joins A Squadron on the evening of Sunday the 11th as a replacement.
Yeah. He's an officer, so that means he's going to be commanding a troop. Yep. And he's going to be commanding men, some of whom have already served for a couple of years in the desert in North Africa. And here's this wet behind the ears 19-year-old telling them what to do. I mean, it's just, whichever way you look at it, it's an awkward situation, isn't it? Yeah. And what the crews are hoping is that this wet behind the ears officer is going to learn pretty quickly and prove his worth. Yeah. Also thinking, oh my God, not only am I going to be in danger, I've got to kind of somehow win over these men, some of whom are kind of double his age. Yeah. And make a fist of things whilst at the same time keeping alive as well. And by this stage, people aren't coming from Lincolnshire and Sherwood area of Nottingham and so on. They're coming from all over.
That time has passed.
That time has passed. It's just whoever's around. They're processed out of the Royal Armoured Corps, down training at Bovington, go to Sandhurst, go to Bovington.
And then you're badged, basically.
You're badged, yeah. You're sent over to Normandy and you're given a badge when you get there. And he's from North London. He's joined the Royal Armoured Corps in September 1942 when he turned 18. And he chooses this only because he's already liked vehicles. And he'd never been particularly keen on walking. And actually, he lived to a very good old age. I think he was like 94 or 95 when David died. But he loved motor racing. Right. And one of his last trips to Normandy was in his E-Type, when he was over 90.
Fantastic. He's told to report to Portsmouth once his training's complete. He's not told why. Yeah. He goes down on the 6th of June, of all days, completely unaware that the invasion is underway. And of course he's unaware it's begun. He spends a couple of days waterproofing tanks, and then he's told he's leaving Portsmouth on the 8th of June. And again, he's ordered to go straight to the docks and load onto a landing ship tank. Then they're off to sea.
That's it. Bye.
Bye, off you go. And then only then do they learn that they're going to Normandy. I think it's absolutely amazing that you've no idea where you're going or who you're going with or what unit you're in until you...
He said we never knew what the hell was going on. No idea at all.
It's extraordinary, isn't it?
Yeah.
And he gets to Gold Beach on the 10th, Saturday the 10th of June, and is immediately confronted with the reality of it. He sees RAF personnel floating face down in the water as he comes into the shore. And of course, the LST shows no regard for them, barges through them.
Yes, because he's got a load of replacement Cromwell tanks,
Right.
and he's in charge.
Right.
So just take that. You're in charge of taking those over to Normandy.
I mean, this is fascinating, isn't it? Because it's still not. There's still no whiff of Sherwood Rangers Yeomanry and what's happening to him, is there?
Saturday the 10th.
Yeah, the day before he joins the regiment. Not a clue. It's extraordinary, this, isn't it? He orders his first Cromwell and its 2 men to disembark, but it sinks as soon as it leaves the ship.
And that's it. They drown.
They're gone.
The trooper that's driving it drowns.
Yeah. And he says, I'd just been talking to them, and there were all these other dead bodies floating all over the place. I'd never seen dead people before. This is rude awakening.
Writ large.
Writ large, isn't it? The other tanks get to shore safely, though.
He spends a night in a field.
It's
And
incredible.
the next morning he doesn't know what to do, and he's sort of waiting around just going, well, what am I supposed to do? And no one seems to know. And every time he asks someone, they just sort of go, I don't know. And eventually someone goes, yeah, you're going to go and join the Sherwood Rangers.
It's extraordinary, isn't it? Because that might even be like a mistake, right? You know what I mean, Jim?
Yeah.
That he was meant to send him to the 4th, 7th Lancers, but in
So
fact...
he gets there that evening. He arrives on point 103 on the evening of Sunday, the 11th of May, the same day, June rather, the same day that Mike Laycock has been killed,
Yeah.
the squadron commander. And John Simpkin, who only 2 days earlier had assumed command of a second in command in replacement of Keith
Yeah.
Douglas, is now acting commander of a squadron because Stanley is acting regimental commander.
Yeah.
None of which is confirmed, and no one knows where Stephen Mitchell is.
Yeah. I mean, he's 19 as well.
Yeah.
He's 19. He's completely
John
green.
Semkin's 23.
Yeah.
Semkin is really nice to him, greets him with warmth, kindness, puts him in the picture, tells him all he needs to know, or as much as he can think of to tell him, and says, right, you're now commanding 5 troop.
God, you'd be forgiven for being in a complete spin, wouldn't you, in a day's dealing with all this, wouldn't you? I mean, maybe he was, and you know, with the years that feeling faded. But I don't know about you, I would be in an absolute, no matter how good my training was. You know, if you join the army in 1942, you know exactly what the war is. If you're 18, you know, you've grown up with the war,
Yeah.
right? But even then,
Yeah, so he takes over from Peter Pepler, who's been killed
Yeah.
on the 9th of June as well, the same day as Keith Douglas, in the same attack. And Peter Pepler had only joined the regiment in May. So, you know, you talk about churn.
yeah.
So Monday the 12th of June is David Render's first day in action. And the first contacts with the crew aren't very promising. He gets there and he orders the crew to TNA the sites, and this is test and adjust them. And you know, you're taught to do this at Sandhurst. And you know what you do is you put a little thread of grass across the barrel, and you kind of line it all up and all the rest of it. And in response, one of the older gunners he says, "Right, can you do this, please?"
Yeah.
One of the guys goes, "You can piss off.
No, I'm not pissing off, and I want to see your sites teed and aid.
Do what you like.
Well, if that's a relationship we're going to have, that's not much cop, is it?
I don't give a monkeys."
There we are. The British Army, ladies and gentlemen, all who tremble in its wake.
And Sergeant Leslie Jackson is 42.
Yeah.
He's married. He's had kids. He's a pre-war regular. He's one of the older guys, and he's been watching this conversation, and he just doesn't do anything to support Render whatsoever because he's just thinking, "Holy moly! I really want to survive this now. I've got a wife.
Yeah.
I've got kids.
Yeah.
I don't need some greenhorn, snotty
Yeah.
idiot kind of poking his
And
head over him."
he'll learn soon enough, or have his head blown off. It's because that's we're talking about officers. We've been talking about officers dying, haven't we? It's the thing.
Yeah, it's one really interesting thing though, because my mate Stuart Tootle ghost wrote David's autobiography.
Yeah.
And actually, Toots is coming to the to We Have Ways Fest
Excellent.
to talk about was it 3-power in
in
Helmand?
Yeah.
Sangin, all the rest
Yeah,
of it.
Sangin, yeah.
Anyway, he goes to write his book, and David had a real beef about Jackson. He said he was a bastard, he didn't help me, he was always undermining me the whole time.
Really?
But when I was doing all my research for this, I found a whole load of letters from David Render written in the 1980s. And he goes, good old Sergeant Jackson, he was always there for me. Really funny.
What time does to people.
Yes, exactly.
And their memories.
But anyway, the following day, they set off to clear some woods near Point 103. And this is over the road, so over towards Point 102.
Right.
So
she's slightly lower than Point 103.
Not much in it.
Not much in it.
A little bit. And again, it's a very defined ridgeline.
The thing is, if you had two hills that were 103 metres tall, you'd have to call one of them 102 or 104, wouldn't you? Because otherwise...
Oh, yeah, because
you can't have 103A and 103B. It's not going to work, is it?
Too much. Should we just shave off a metre?
Just shave a metre off, for heaven's sake.
It's very easy to see.
What difference does it make? Yeah.
Right? Anyway, so they head over there and they're advancing. At one point, Render rolls up his battle dress sleeves. In his first day in action, he's with Neville Fern.
Right.
Neville Fern is one of the kind of more experienced guys, the troop commanders in a squadron. You're not completely thrown into it. And as soon as he does, Neville Fern tells him off. He says, never roll up your sleeves because that's protection against fire.
Yeah.
And he says, never get out of the tank and go swanning about. You'll get yourself killed. He says, never, ever wear a helmet because it's an easy target for snipers and gets in the way. He says, put your helmet on the machine gun bracket instead. And the Germans will think it's your head.
And shoot
because they never have machine guns on the top of theirs.
No, they don't believe in them. Yeah.
No, he just thinks it's a waste of time.
Yeah.
And he says, never, ever raise your voice excitedly over the radio net. Because as soon as you do that, people can't hear you.
Yeah. We were never given that advice on this podcast.
Never wear a helmet.
Never wear.
You've done it occasionally.
I've worn a helmet a couple of times while podcasting, but I do occasionally raise my voice. I do raise my voice excitedly on the radio net.
Well, that's different time. So it's an incredibly steep learning curve.
Yeah.
And David Render has the wit to realise that you got to learn and heed those lessons very quickly, or else you're toast.
Yeah.
Anyway, by Tuesday, the 13th of June, the regiment is finally pulled back out of the line, and they go to a little village just down the way, only a couple of miles back. And John Simpkin is totally exhausted. As I mentioned, he's only 23.
Yeah.
But he's now commanding a squadron of well over 100 men. And he's told that evening the squadron's going to have to move again. But Simpkin recalls, everyone's asleep. I got on the air and couldn't raise anybody in the entire squadron. And he has to shake one trooper awake and get him to bang a hammer on the tanks to wake everyone. And then they set off, but they're setting off to rest camp.
You see, one of the things I was thinking about this while we were doing our last episode is how do you even tell the days apart? They've got their own rhythm with the combat, and yes, it's night late, but you're so exhausted all the time that the sleep you grab is the sleep you grab. It's not like you're tucking yourself into bed at night and getting up for breakfast. Is it? And that these days must be, in their memories, must be like this relentless blur with it's only because Leslie Skinner, for instance, is keeping a diary that the days have a shape in his memory. I think it must be this sort of smear of daylight, action, the odd sleep when you can get it in your mind, and all of it you're adrenalized to as far as you possibly can be, as far as your body can be adrenalized. You just think if you're a tank commander and you're basically on your feet all day, but in a cramped position, so you can't move your legs, can't stretch your legs, and if you're sat in the other positions, you're like that all day in a boiling hot tank.
Well, you are when you're in action.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. I mean, there's lots of sort of, hurry up and slow down.
Yeah.
It's so faltering. Any movement, it's not like you sort of hurtle down a hill and in sort of
No, everything's fits and starts.
Everything fits and starts.
Yeah.
So start. So basically, they're ordered out on that evening. They're ordered out of Saint-Pierre 103, and they're sent back to this little village called Chouain. Chouain is one of the most beautiful villages in Normandy. It's absolutely gorgeous. Again, there's various orchards and stuff, and they're camped in an orchard, and nearby is a medium regiment of 5.5s. When Simpkin is told he's got to get up again, they're alerted and saying, actually, our rest period is cancelled. We're going to have to go and do something.
Yeah.
And then it's called off again.
Yeah.
Everyone's tired, and Skinner's been kind of hurtling around, burying people, going back to the coast to kind of check on supplies and welcome in new men and all the rest of it, because he's playing this sort of pastoral role as well as the actual priest. And so, and he writes in his diary,
"Nightmare of Bayeux. Arrived 02:30 hours, dead tired. Dropped down under greatcoat on bare ground to sleep."
And meanwhile, a squadron has been stood down again, and so they've gone back to sleep. And those medium guns are firing throughout the night. And Simpkin sleeps through 14 hours straight despite these guns firing. And I remember him telling me this. He said, "I never heard a single one." and he didn't get up till 4:30 the following afternoon.
Yeah.
And he spends an hour getting food, another hour washing, shaving, dressing in fresh clothes, and then kind of, writing letters, whatever.
And these are the kind of guns that are so loud they'll shake your fillings out, aren't they?
Yeah, completely. And then Skinner then gets to work. He writes up a list of the 54 Sherwood Rangers that have been killed or wounded since D-Day. When you think in total in tanks, I think it's 328.
Yeah. Well, and we talked about how there's kind of
That's sixth, isn't it?
Yes, just under 700 men in the regiment, full stop. So, but the sharp end is being chewed through.
And those 54 are all crew, tank crew.
Yeah.
So that's 10 tanks worth.
Yeah.
And he has to note the location of every grave. Then he has to sort through all their belongings. Then he has to write to the next of kin, which is also a task for the squadron leaders and for Christopherson, who is still acting CEO. Stephen Mitchell has reappeared.
Well, that's a relief.
So he's all right. And he doesn't want to be CEO. He wants Stanley to be CEO, and he's prepared to be second in command.
Right.
But he doesn't want to be CEO.
Doesn't want the job.
So at this point, on the 13th of June, they're awaiting confirmation of that.
Yeah.
Stuart Hills and Arthur Reddish, who were in the same crew, they have now rejoined the regiment. They rejoin it in an orchard on the 13th of June. So, best part of a week after D-Day.
Yeah.
They're pleased to be back. But they find that the journey up to the front line is incredibly sobering because the fields are littered with dead cattle on their back, legs stuck up in the air. There's loads and loads of photos of this. But worse, there's a dead body strewn all across the landscape. And Hills writes, "It brought it home to me with a trembling horror what I was going to face and perhaps suffer. I knew then that more scenes of carnage and devastation would inevitably follow." Yeah, they will.
When you get this close to the people, looking at the people and their experiences, all the chaps on maps, arrows of the Normandy battle and the controversies and a lot of the way that this battle's been written about, the overlord battle's been written about, sort of fades away and disappears when you're this personal with the people, and turns it into a very different thing. And also, pulls us away from who's better at fighting arguments.
Yeah.
Which dominate a lot of the discourse about the Second World War.
Yeah, because this is just about ordinary people with ordinary emotions and anxieties and worries and fears
and also
stresses and strains.
The horror of it, that it's relentless.
Yes, because these are just nice, decent people.
Yeah, but that it's that you can be an unpleasant person and it's horror and hell. What we have here is like the reality of the damn thing laid bare. There's no glory or adventure or gallantry in any of this, is there?
No.
And the other thing I'm really struck by is that lots of these guys, they're not. And when we talked about the different tanks, we talked about tank on tank isn't really the meat and potatoes of what's going on here. It's tank versus everything else, and that's what we've seen. Commanding officers killed by mortars, not by Panthers and Tigers.
Chief Douglas killed by an airburst.
Exactly.
Someone else shot in the chest by a sniper.
Exactly. Mortar fire being a big feature. And the one Tiger tank we have run into has been dispatched by a Sherman that supposedly isn't capable of that.
Yeah.
So I think that's what's quite interesting is by looking at it all this way, we're sort of shaking the box of cornflakes and getting quite a different pattern. On the 15th, Bill Wharton writes to his wife about the squadron. I think that he's able to say this is quite extraordinary. He says, despite the tight corners we've been in, we've been able to laugh it off afterwards and have at times simply roared at our own wit. Maybe it's a form of relief, but anyway, it helps a lot to take away the strain of fighting. Yeah, I'm sure he wouldn't share any of those jokes with his wife, though, would he?
But everyone's been poking fun at Trooper Mills, who's Wharton's young gunner. Yeah. And Mills once told the boys he'd never smoked except in dire emergencies. Then in a brief interlude in the fighting around Saint-Pierre, all the boys were smoking furiously, including Mills. And Wharton writes, now whenever we hand round the fags, we never fail to ask him if the situation is acute enough to warrant him lighting up. I mean, how do you not love these guys? It's just so funny. And on the 15th, Stanley is confirmed as the new commanding officer of the regiment. And it's interesting. He wants it. He's ambitious and he wants a challenge. But I think he also thinks he's watched the regiment evolve, and what he wants is a fresh approach to leadership. Laycock is hugely respected. No one doubts his fighting spirit and the fact that he's been the backbone of the regiment, but everyone's a bit scared of him. And Christopherson wants to shape his command of the regiment in a much more accessible way, which is much more suited to the times, with these young guys like David Render arriving age 19 and Stuart Hill's also 19. He wants to be a bit more avuncular
and consensual.
Yeah. He wants to absolutely impose his authority, which is he just has a natural authority. People just jump when he says jump. He wants a sort of more collegiate, softer, kind of more caring approach to his men, more approachable. So Stephen Mitchell becomes second in command, official. John Simpkin becomes A Squadron commander, and Peter Solari takes over as C Squadron commander. Anyway, fighting continues around that area, point 103, 102, for the next couple of, for the next 10 days.
Yeah.
And there's some really, really bitter fighting around the Bois de Boulogne, all around that area. And again, I mentioned these aerial photographs, but if you look at the aerial photographs taken around that time, all the fields around there absolutely pockmarked with shell bursts and shell holes and what have you. The next big operation is going to be Operation Martlet, which is a precursor for Operation Epsom, which we talked about in some length in our Normandy series. Which is the first major British coordinated offensive that takes place.
A gigantic set piece.
Yeah, which is launched on Monday, the 26th of June. And Martlet is a precursor which begins the day before.
For tidying up the lines before Epsom.
Well, and getting some high ground.
Yeah. This is an epic Monty set piece.
Yes.
Or a precursor to an epic Monty set piece.
Yes.
Join us after the break to find out just how epic and gigantic and what the Sherwood Rangers Yeomanry find themselves doing in that battle. Welcome back to We Have Ways of Making You Talk with me, Murray and James Holland. And Jim, we've dangled the prospect of Operation Martlet before people.
Well, they've had this, the Sherwood Rangers have had this very, very steep learning curve, as have the 49th Polar Bear Division. So they landed with the 50th Tyne Tees. The 50th Tyne Tees then got kind of switched somewhere else, and in their place came the 49th Polar Bear Division. And they're so-called the Polar Bear because they've been stationed on Iceland. They hadn't really seen any action. You don't see an awful lot.
When you're a garrison
on Iceland.
Yeah.
So that was a problem, and the problem was, again, this whole outranking system. That you had the completely greenhorn infantry division outranking the incredibly well-experienced Sherwood Rangers and 4th, 7th Dragoon Guards. And that was a bit of a problem. But they're kind of sorting out, and it's really interesting when you look at all the brigade conference minutes and things like that. All you see is from the three armoured regiments, the 24th Lancers, 4th, 7th Dragoon Guards and Sherwood Rangers. All they're doing is sort of mithering about the fact that the infantry don't seem to know what to do and they're not supporting them properly. Because it's a two-way thing.
Yeah.
The infantry are the eyes and ears of the armour on the ground. the armourer providing the fire support. But what was happening was every time a shot went out, all the infantry would just hit the deck and lie on the ground. And that was no use to anybody. And so there's some very, very difficult fighting, but they're still together in partnership with the 49th Polar Division when Operation Martlet gets conceived. And the idea of Martlet is to push the line forward on the western right-hand flank of what is going to be Operation Epsom, which is this big operation, this first properly coordinated drive operation from Second Army, British Second Army, just to the kind of west of Caen.
Yeah.
And so these guys, the 49th Polar Bears and 8th Armoured Brigade, are to the west of them. So they're on the right-hand flank of the force that's being brought together for Operation Epsom. We're only talking about a matter of a few miles. Down in the valley below, directly in front of them, below point 102, which is further over to the east from point 103. Right in front of 103, you've got Saint-Pierre and Tilly. A bit further on, you've got Fontenay-le-Pesnel. And one at point 102 is above that. And that's where the bulk of the fighting has been. It has been in this sort of this block of land to the road from Saint-Pierre / Tilly to Fontenay, up the ridge to 102 to 103. If you think of that as a big rectangle, that's where most of the fighting has been going on since they've got there on the 8th of June. And they're still there. And Martlet, the idea is to get beyond Fontenay to this Rauray ridge, which again is barely a ridge at all.
Yeah.
But that is both to deny that ridge to the enemy and gain it for themselves.
Yeah.
As an artillery observation point.
Yeah.
So that's the aim of Martlet as a precursor. It's like a warm-up act, the amuse-bouche, the appetizer for Epsom. And it's split so that the 49th Bears Division, Polar Bear Division, is split on a two-prong attack, and you've got Sherwood Rangers on the left, on the eastern side, and you've got the 4th, 7th Dragoon Guards and the 24th Lancers on the right, supporting the other brigades of the 49th Polar Bear Division. And the first day sees B Squadron in action. This is Sunday, the 25th of June, and it's very attritional. They don't get as far as they're intended to. Martlet's supposed to be a one-day operation to get the ridge. They don't get to the ridge, but they do get into Fontenay-le-Pesnel. It's a bit of a nightmare, to be perfectly honest. And B Squadron is battling hard with the infantry in Fontenay on the first day. And by the end of that evening, Stan Perry, old friend of the show, he's in his tank in B Squadron. He actually knocks out the spire at Fontenay-le-Pesnel. It extends on to the next day because they're in the middle of the battle now, so you've got to see it through to its fulfillment, and you've got to get onto that ridge at Rauray. And by this time, it is the role of C Squadron and A Squadron to take on the mantle, and it is C Squadron first.
The Normandy landscape's really interesting, isn't it? Because it is these wide open spaces, wide open farms, but then these tight villages. But also, the landscape's actually quite unpredictable because the rivers cut through lower down and will drop down. Even though, at a glance, it all looks pretty uniform, doesn't it? It's always full of surprises. There's always a sunken road here. There's always a concealed brook there. Ideal places for defenders to hold themselves up. And also, if you're infantry, this involves you've got to follow tanks for 1,000-yard stretches, and basically until you bump into something. This is what C Squadron is going to lead with the infantry following for the first 1,000 yards, during which time you must feel like completely naked if the infantrymen doing that, and the tanks can't feel much better either.
No.
And then A Squadron will push through C Squadron and continue on towards Rauray. As in all of these things, there's an artillery barrage to proceed. So 3:30, the artillery puts in its shoot. And then Peter Soleri leads his squadron into attack behind that artillery. So the rolling barrage, and he's coming in, creeping, which you can do in a tank. Not so cushy if you're an infantryman, and much more to be nervous about if you're not in an armoured vehicle. And he splits his squadron in two, one half crossing the fields to the left of the road to Rauray and the other half to the right. And when you go up this road, you can completely see it, can't you? That's how you do it. How else are you going to do it? And he waves he's leading, and then he waves onto Stuart Hills. He says, you go ahead. And this makes sense because the lead tank is obviously the most vulnerable, and the squadron leader, he needs to be protected, doesn't he? When you're thinking about these battles and this edging forward and what it must feel like in the pit of your stomach.
Absolutely dreadful. And actually, C Squadron, early on that day, they've had the nest of Spandau. So just to the eastern end of of Fontenay,
Yep.
just off the road on the northern side of the main road going to Caen.
Yep.
There is this little triangle of trees.
Yeah.
And that's where the nest of Spandau, it's obviously there's machine gunners in there. They have to clear those out. But also this attack that they've got to do, the first thing they've got to do is they've got to take St. Nicholas Farm. So it's going to be, as you say, it's going to be this leapfrogging scenario.
Yeah.
With C Squadron, with the 7th Duke of Wellington's regiment, who've already cut and run in an earlier engagement.
Well, and they're one of the battalions who are very often sort of wheeled out as proof that the British Army is not up to scratch in Normandy, because they're dissolved eventually, aren't they? And the men are sent elsewhere.
Yeah.
And here's an example of how they have a very bad time.
They do. They sort of get themselves together by this day. So that's happened kind of, like a week earlier or whatever. And they have to get into this farm. That farm is still there.
Yeah.
And the way C Squadron do it is you've got the road going straight up to Rauray, the village of Rauray, about a mile and a half away. And then on the left-hand side is, as you're looking towards the Rauray Ridge, as you're looking south, so on the eastern side is the farm.
Yeah.
And what Solari decides is that he's going to get him round the back of the farm and come through the orchard at the back of the farm and then come in that way. And they do. And Stuart Hill's tank bursts through the hedgerows surrounding the orchard and farm. And Arthur Reddish, who's the co-driver at the front with the machine gun, he's firing his Browning. There's no enemy tanks to be seen. And they roll towards the farmhouse with 2 other Shermans beside. The machine guns blazing. The noise is absolutely immense because suddenly they're in the farmyard and it's all very close. So you can sort of picture it, can't you? And then they clear the farmhouse, cross the road and roll into a new field. And Rauray is up ahead, and there's this hedge line that runs across at 90 degrees to the direction of the road. So in parallel to the ridge line, and that's where they fall behind. And at that point, they spot a Panzer IV emerging from a wood.
Enemy Hornet, 11 o'clock, 1,500 yards.
Yeah, and then Hills responds, Gunner, traverse left, steady on, enemy tank, AP, 1,500 yards, fire when ready.
Yeah, it's all very calm. Yes. Well, the thing is, I mean, you know, the advice is don't get excited on the radio. I don't know how you're not. I don't know how you're not excited in that situation.
Well, I think probably are.
And there are many different kinds of excitement, of course.
Yes. They see this first shot hits the tank, and they can see the Panzer jolt into reverse, and then it stalls, and that makes them all laugh. It's kind of excitement, but it's also kind of a sense of superiority. We're better than these guys, because they've got a crap driver who's so nervous by being hit that he's stalled the tank. And we've all been there, haven't we?
We've all been there. It's hit by another one. Another shot strikes this Panzer IV, and then the driver managed to find reverse and engage reverse gears. It goes back off into the trees.
Then there's a pause, and their job is now done. They've now got to consolidate that gain. They've now got the farm, St. Nicholas Farm. They've got this line, so they're now well on the way. And so the idea is that the next phase, and it's by now, I mean, this attack starts at 3:30. It's now about 5 o'clock, something like that, a little bit after 5 o'clock. A Squadron will now come through and finish it off. And they're going to do the next stage. But they've got to get there. So they're coming down from their position on Hill 1.102 and behind the Bois line. They're coming down into the village. And this is the point where John Simpkin bumps into the Tiger tank that was described by Stanley Christopherson right at the beginning. And it's about 5:30 p.m. on the afternoon of Monday, the 26th of June, 1944. So David Render is with his troop, 5th Troop. He's in a little field between St. Nicholas Farm and the edge of Fontenay. And he looks across and he just sees this beret going down the hill, going down the road on the other side of the hedge. So we're in the field. There's a hedge.
He sees a hat moving along.
He just sees a hat moving along. And he just thinks, hang on a minute, that beret's not a British beret. And he suddenly thinks, oh my God, that's a Tiger. Yeah. So he immediately gets on the net, on the B net, which is the Squadron net. And warns Simpkin. Simpkin is coming down the main Tilly to Caen Road, which runs along the northern edge of Fontenay, turns into the corner just as the Tiger tank is turning at the bottom end of the Rue Massieu, which is about 300 yards long. The Rue Massieu goes straight across the main road into a track, into a lane, where there is another farmhouse, which is now the Sherwood Rangers regimental headquarters. Stanley is standing in front of Robin Hood, the CO's tank, looking at his map, looks up, sees this Tiger tank and just thinks, looks, I'm done for, as this Tiger sort of creaks into view. Just at that moment, Simpkin turns right into the Rue Massieu and they face off. And Stanley says it was about 30 yards. It wasn't. It's about 300 yards. Can't possibly have been 30 yards.
No.
But because of Simpkin's greater experience, he's got one up the spout. He's got a 75mm round, armor-piercing round. He fires immediately. As soon as he sees it, he just says fire, because he's got his head out of the turret.
Yeah.
And the shell hits the gun mantlet, which is the extra bit of armor where the barrel enters the turret of the Tiger tank. Spalling, little bits of hot metal splay out and blinds or hits in the face the driver, who sort of goes Gotten Himmel, screams, doesn't know, can't see anything, stops. In the next few seconds, Simpkin fires a further 9 rounds, but all of high explosive. And that's the advantage of the Sherman tank, because it's smaller shells, it's ergonomically laid out, so right-handed gunner can load it from this side. Loading one after another, boom, 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 just keeps firing, creates lots of smoke. And of course, when you get hit, if you're a tank commander, the first thing you do is then retreat into the turret.
Yeah.
The moment you retreat in the turret, you're dependent on periscopes, but you've also got, in those first seconds, you've got to adjust and be able to get into change position, look at the periscope, and all you can see is smoke.
Yeah.
So it goes hit, hit, hit. No one can see anything, so no one can fire. So then they hand a hock. They come out and they surrender.
Amazing.
So they haven't actually knocked out. They haven't brewed up the tank.
No.
It's just disabled it.
Yeah.
And it's disabled it because it's no longer got a crew. And what this shows is that experience and rate of fire are really, really important in this scenario. And the thing about that Tiger tank is, what the hell was he doing there? And what's really interesting is that afternoon, Muncher, who is the 12th SS Brigade commander, has been told to organise a battle group. And they're absolutely run ragged by this stage.
Yeah.
They've been in combat since 7th of June.
Yeah.
They haven't had replacements. They're not getting David Render's equivalents in straight immediately. They haven't got enough replacements. They're all absolutely exhausted, and they've been fighting solidly.
And they're in a state of permanent reaction as well, isn't it? They don't know this is Operation Martlet. They don't know that that's Epsom over there and Martlet over here and whatever. How could they?
Constantly taken from Peter to feed Paul.
Yeah.
So I think what's happened is this lone Tiger. So also they're mixing units together. So what Muncher's got together is Max Muncher. He's not Muncher, he's Wuncher. Max Wuncher. What he's got is a mixed force of different units. So they've got one company of Panzer IVs, one company of Panthers, one company of Tigers, or a troop of Tigers, or whatever they call it in the German organization. And they're all mixing them together, and they haven't fought together, and they haven't operated together. And so this lone Tiger tank has been told to come from the western side of the battlefield, get yourself over to protect the Rauray Ridge. And I think he's just taken a wrong turn.
Yeah.
And he's found himself, he thinks he's in Rauray. He's not, he's in Fontenay.
It's easily done.
Yeah, and he's knackered. And suddenly there's a Sherman firing at him. He can barely see it. He doesn't have his other Shermans following up. And he just thinks, surrender's a better form of valor, and who can blame him, frankly.
Yeah.
So then Simpkin moves on, joins Render, and gathers together the rest of A Squadron together.
They're now going on into Rauray, and David Render finds himself under machine gun fire.
Yeah.
And it's, obviously, you talked about Spandau Wood earlier. Every machine gun's a Spandau in the British mind. But what that, or an MG42, and this is Hitler's buzzsaw, like that.
Mortars going off.
Like that. That's in mortars. Like that. Anyway. And obviously,
One more mortar for luck.
obviously the infantry, and the distant crump of the round. The infantry, and we talked about the polar bears this little bit less experienced. They all drop to the ground, fade from view, which leaves the SRY guys to have to respond to this machine gun fire.
Yeah,
and eventually the shooting calms down. Eventually they're able to, the infantry reappear. They pull these Germans out of their tanks, and one of them in particular, I really love these snapshots into what the people are like. One of them is seething with resentment. He refuses to raise his eyes, and another shell lands nearby, and everyone else flinches and he stays standing.
Yeah.
And David Render recalls he laughed at those who had taken cover, and I can still remember the startled look of momentary surprise when on his face as a shell splinter struck him square on the forehead and he crumpled dead on the ground.
Yes.
So this attack was supposed to start at 5:30. Actually, it's 5:30 that Render has his engagement with the Tiger tank. It's about 7:30 that they're finally ready to go. And how Simpkin has organised his squadron. He says basically this is a suicide. This is a balaclava charge.
Right.
And he says right, I'm going to have my Praetorian Guard in the middle. With the Fireflies, we'll go down we'll have the road, this single road. You and I've been on that road.
Yeah.
We're going up to Rauray Ridge. We'll be there. Everyone else, make sure you're far enough spaced apart that you never overlap. You never want a view where there's two tanks together.
Yeah.
You always want to be spaced apart enough. And he said, and we'll just inch our way up. We won't charge. We'll just inch our way up and we'll shoot stuff. And so basically what they're doing is they're just firing at everything they can see.
Yeah.
But they're basically doing it on their own with very, very minimal infantry support. It's about 9 o'clock by the time they're really starting to get going. None of the Panzer commanders has expected an attack so late in the day. And all the commanders, all the tank commanders, whether it's Render or Neville Fern or the legendary Sergeant George Dring, who's also in a squadron, who we've already mentioned, they're just glued to binoculars. They're peering all they can, looking around, looking for targets, and they start to see them. And the reason is the German counterattack is just not coordinated. You've got Panzer IVs from one unit, you've got Panthers from another, you've got Tigers. They're all coming from earlier engagements on a different part of the battlefront as well. So they're already kind of punch drunk on battle and exhausted. David Render spots a Panzer through his binoculars and says, AP, traverse right 800 yards, enemy Hornet dug into the right side of prominent building. And his gunner fires a shot, which is too short. Render then swaps places with him and fires another shot himself and then some more. and all of these are hits. And Render has got he's had sort of 2.5 weeks in the battle zone and he's now, he's hardened.
He can do it.
And he knows it. He's got the control of his men. He's got that natural authority even though he's only 19. He now knows what he's about.
This German counterattack is, as you say, is a patchwork of whoever they can get.
Yes, whoever they down there, whoever they can, Tommies.
Exactly, whoever they can muster.
Yeah, exactly.
And George Dring, who we will hear of more later in the series, who's a sergeant in Dick Holman's 4 Troop. He sees this force of Panzer IVs with Tigers and Panthers appear. He sees them in good time and sees them first. He shoots one Panzer through the driver's visor from 200 yards. I mean, this is all happening quite close, isn't it?
Yeah.
He then fires another 5 rounds at a Tiger, smashing the driver's periscope. And the crew bail out. And then he takes out another Panther and then another Tiger on his 4th shot. I mean,
but this is all happening over quite a long time.
I know, but this is you say over quite a long time. This is all in an evening.
There's this brilliant moment where he's shooting a Tiger that he sees emerge at Rauray, the little hamlet village of Rauray. And another trooper tells him over the radio that he thinks Dring has missed and hit a brick wall. And Dring just goes, "You don't see a brick wall spark like that."
It's incredible.
And they also hit this Panther tank, which suddenly streaks across their front from the western side. A Panther just suddenly appears along the road. And it's obviously, again, it's a bit like...
It's another one of these,
Get your ass over there. And it's come there. Before he knows where it is, it's been hit up the arse on the side.
Yeah.
That's actually the model that I made.
Yes, I remember.
There's a very famous photograph of the Panther abandoned at this crossroads. And we stood there, haven't we?
Yeah, we have. Yeah.
And that's a joint kill between Neville Fern and George Dring. Neville Fern hits a shot at the back, and then Dring knocks it out.
The Germans are properly in disarray, aren't they? And again, it goes to show that if you want to judge the tanks with your top trump cards, then the Germans should win this encounter. But
yeah, it's absolutely amazing, this engagement, because by the end of the day, it is getting quite dark. They have to call it off because you can't have tanks at the front in darkness, because infantry can infiltrate in the middle of the night and drop a grenade down into the hatch and all that kind of stuff. So you have to pull back. So you just have to, they haven't quite got the village, but they've almost got, they're on the ridge, but they haven't completely cleared the village, but it's just too dark to carry on. So they stop. But in that engagement, that suicide charge, which Simpkin fears is going to be the last for all of them, worries that they're all going to get wiped out. They knock out 13 enemy tanks for none of their own.
Wow.
Including, I think it's 4 Tigers.
Incredible.
Which is all from Whitman's heavy. And it is extraordinary. And it also shows that Simpkin has this rule, which is just shoot, and keep shooting if you see an enemy tank. And he also has this theory, and he tells all his men, that he who shoots first generally comes out on top. Because of this factor that the commander will always sink into the turret the moment you're hit.
Yeah.
The moment you fire in the turret, you can't see diddly squat.
Yeah.
Very, very, very little. A highly trained, highly motivated group of tank men who know what they're doing will always best
Yeah.
a force which is in disarray, exhausted, and not coordinated, even if on paper they're in better tanks.
But what's interesting about this is this is their experience on the ground. This is also how the battle. The idea is you get the enemy off balance. It's always about getting him off balance, and then you can overwhelm him, roll him up.
Yeah,
and that's if you want to know what the strategy in Normandy is.
Yes,
from a grand strategy perspective,
it's knocking from 2 feet to 1 and then tipping him over.
Yeah, and that's the thinking. The thinking right at the top is this is how we're going to win this battle. Draw the enemy in, destabilize him, create disarray, get him off balance, turn him over. And here it is happening. Here it is happening at the squadron level. Yeah. So the squadron battle is reflecting the strategic battle almost perfectly.
Yeah.
Because whatever resources the Germans feed in, the Allies have a means of dealing with it and a way of making the chaos continue. Because this is the thing, this is, as you said, this is Martlet. This is the prelude to this gigantic, colossal.
It has begun that very same day.
But this is the point. It's the amuse-bouche. This colossal cracks, and the idea is to basically knock the Germans off their perch. And you're seeing it happen here.
It's one of the great British tank engagements of the war, really, in terms of successes to victory to defeat kind of thing. 13-0 is an amazing bag. The following morning, it's B Squadron's turn to take over because it's always was. It's a sort of rolling conveyor belt of leads into reserve, into the middle, to the front again. So it's B Squadron's turn. They go into the village. They clear they're clearing the village, and they've just got halfway through the village. And the leading troop gets knocked out. 3 tanks, boom, 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 just like that by an anti-tank gun that they haven't seen. John Hanson Lawson, who's the B Squadron commander, gets wounded. His tank's burning. Bill Wharton, who we've come across quite a lot, he jumps out of his tank, goes and rescues him.
Yeah.
And pulls him out. And it's just, that's how quickly it can flip. You can be 13-0 one day, you can be 3 knocked out in a trice the next day. And that won't be the first time that happens, the last time that happens.
And interestingly, but to an anti-tank weapon rather than a tank.
Yeah, indeed.
Which goes back to a point we made earlier.
So they secure the ridge, and then that's kind of, they're then kind of slightly demob happy after that. And so they're all relaxed a bit. But I think it's worth, just before we finish this episode and this 4th episode in this series, of just going through what John Simpkin has had to do in that 24 hours of Monday, the 26th of June. I mean, it is quite short. This is the pressure these guys are under. And don't forget that Simpkin, age 23, is a squadron commander with, 150 men under his charge. So you kick off 00:30, so midnight. And that's an O group with Stanley Christopherson and the senior officers. So an O group is an orders group. That's where you do briefing for what you're going to be doing the following day, gathering around the kind of the Jeep or the Humber Scout car or whatever it is, chatting through what they're going to do, maps out, all the rest of it. Briefing of the previous day's events and the plans for the following day. Then you can go and get a little bit of kip. 3:30. Wake up, have a cup of tea.
Yep.
I mean, it's just relentless, isn't it?
It is. I mean, this becomes clear as we go. So then at 0400 hours, netting of radios. So that's
which is not easy,
and making sure, but essential. So you've got to get that right.
It's like doing this on a knob, getting it absolutely.
Yeah, and then breakfast, which is tea, boiled sweets and biscuits, and that's at 4, and then at 6 o'clock in the morning, 0600 C Squadron then move out. Half an hour later, 0630, they move out with the rest of A Squadron, and then by 0700 hours, they're in position overlooking Fontenay. And that's when he checks the crews are all right. He talks to his troop
He might
commanders.
get out of his tank at that point, wander around.
Let the guys know what the idea is for the day and what possibly to expect, or what he can possibly know. I mean,
But also, it's this whole hanging around while you know you're going to be going into action at some point.
Yeah. So for 5 hours from 0700, from when they're in position overlooking Fontenay, until noon, they're listening on the radio to how the battle's going, talking to infantry commanders. At lunch is at noon. It's bully beef, biscuits, tinned fruit, and tea. So
Standard fare.
Absolutely standard. And then another three and a half hours of hurry up and wait. And they move forward at 15:30 hours, and they watch C Squadron attacks the St Nicholas farm. And obviously, guys will be grabbing some sleep, they'll be getting a doze in if they possibly can, but they'll also be making sure that their kit, their weapons are clean and that the sights are clear, and all while you're on hurry up and wait. And then at 1700 hours, they move into the Rue Massieu, and this is when they come face to face with the Tiger. 10 rounds in that encounter. The Tiger's knocked out. Then they move forward to the assembly point in the field southeast of the Rue Massieu.
Which is where David Render had been.
Yeah. And bear in mind, he's been up since 03:30 hours.
Yes, 03:30.
Yeah. It's 5 o'clock in the evening now.
And he's the commander, so he's got to be on it. So he can have kips, but he's going to be interrupted all the time.
Yeah. He's at everyone's disposal as well. At 5:30, they move forward up to the St Nicholas farm. At 1800 hours, so 6 o'clock in the evening, the infantry of the 7th Duke of Wellington Regiment advances 500 yards and digs in. 1930 hours. I mean, this is the long days of the summer, because come the winter, this is all the other way around, isn't it? There's only so much they can do. Whereas on a long summer's day in Normandy, midsummer, you can fill every waking moment with mayhem if you need to.
Yep.
At 1930 hours, he announces all stations advance on his B-net. So A Squadron advances.
And they rumble off.
Off they go, with the headquarters squadron of Fireflies in the centre, 2 troop on the left, 5 troop on the right, 3 and 4 troops behind. 9 o'clock in the evening, 2100s, A Squadron are halfway to Rauray itself.
So they've done about half a mile in that time, in an hour and a half.
God, I find the tension's unbearable. By 10:30, 22:30 hours, A Squadron have basically got to, they're before Rauray, they're nearly there. This is when the 13 enemy tanks are knocked out for no loss in the squadron, and darkness is falling, so the infantry do what they do, they dig in.
And the tanks pull back.
So
they pull back at 11 o'clock.
Yeah.
Okay, echelons arrive. They then refuel, rearm, maintenance checks. Midnight,
They eat their supper.
They have some supper. 0300, half past midnight, O group again. A 1 a.m. bed outside next to tank. That's his day. And rinse, repeat.
No
wonder he's sleeping 14 hours through some 5.5-inch barrage.
I mean, the thing is, thank God he's 23, because speaking as a 58-year-old man.
Can you imagine it, though? It's just so much is expected of these young men.
Yeah. Well, I mean, staying awake for a start.
Yes.
I have to say, because the thing is, every now and again you do the calculus, like, would I rather be an infantryman lying in a ditch, hiding in a slip trench? Would I rather that, or would I rather be in a tank? Where at least I haven't got to lie in a ditch, and I'm protected from mortar fire, and we've got a great big cannon at our disposal rather than maybe my rifle. But when you read a day like that, particularly for the officer, with the responsibility as well and decision making, I think I'm back in the ditch right now. I don't know about anyone else. Let us know which you'd prefer, the ditch or the tin can.
But that's where we're going to leave the Sherwood Rangers for now.
Yes.
And we'll be coming back later on this year to see how they get on in the rest of the Normandy campaign. Yeah. And there's plenty of adventures and scrapes.
Many, many more days like that ahead. I think it's fair to say.
And they get through Normandy, and then they're on to their part of Market Garden.
Yeah. They're the first British troops into Germany, aren't they?
They are.
Go to wehaveways.pod.co.uk, and there's some truly fantastical merch.
Yes, there is.
And I've not dared wear mine yet. But this is
I haven't worn mine either yet, but look at
Stoic
that.
Club.
Look at that.
Look at that.
Everyone loves HMS Cossack.
Yeah. Where is the enemy?
Favourite
The Navy's
Favorite
here.
Destroyer.
Yeah.
Or is it glue one? I can't remember.
So we will see you at the festival, I'm sure. If not, we'll see you with our next episode. There's so much to come because this is the bottomless pit to end all bottomless pits. It wasn't the war to end all wars. We'll see you soon. Thanks for listening and watching. Cheerio.
Cheerio.